through their education, giving them those great opportunities that many of the great leaders on our island had. And we're not seeing that. We're not seeing those work placements for our young people. We do need our economy to be diversifying. We have seen that shift in our GDP. We're seeing e-gaming licences decreasing. How many people, Mr. President, are employed in that area or will? We cannot just wait for this to happen. We cannot just look to see if we get to 100,000 people. We've always been known as leaders in our digital services, biotech, fintech, and advanced manufacturing. But an awful lot of these areas, Mr. President, will be operating through AI and training people without giving them practical skills to then operate with AI. We're not really joining up. That to me is a strategy that's small scale, but we're not competing with the individuals globally and the investment that people get globally to attract this talent and technology. We have a digital strategy. It's a nice document, Mr. President. It provides some interesting words, a vision that will position the island at the forefront of AI, blockchain, and the digital trade. But it's not a strategy that attracts and retains talent in high-paid jobs. We've heard from members today that the people that we're attracting to the island are doing 2 or 3 jobs to enable living on our beautiful island. Housing development we all know is important, but I honestly don't believe it's the top priority that will fix the problems the island has. 2 young girls last week wanted to go out for dinner, nearly 16, at tea time. They couldn't go in most of the venues they went to. They needed an adult with them. They're nearly 16, Mr. President. So we're driving our young people when they want to go out and do things in the community like that to fast food outlets that will accept them on their money. This is where we need to be building what people will come for and be attracted to alongside everything else. We keep hearing about smarter public sector and reform and efficiencies, and we heard from the Efficiencies Minister. But efficiency isn't just about reducing that headcount. It's about transforming the way that government is going to deliver those services to our people. If we continue to keep cutting without looking at that structure that we want to deliver the core services for the people of the island, which is the role of the government, and stop interfering in areas that we shouldn't, we're not going to get very far. The challenges are clear, but the gaps in this plan are also very clear. The next 12 months can be about action, but we hear the word strategy and reviews all too often. That's not action, that's not delivering. That's another strategy, that's another review. So let's start trying to drive that growth for that future Isle of Man, 50 years ahead. As governments of the past have done, I've been looking back at some of the old Hansards, etc., and the amazing debates and the amazing documentation that was coming forward for our island, that infrastructure that the island really did need. And we have got it in many areas for 100 population, but the elephant in the room is our health services crashing. Government does need to work hand in hand with all areas of business and industry on the island. It doesn't have to hold their hand or pay for what they are doing. We're seeing that all too much, Mr. President. We have expertise in finance, law, compliance. We have those here, but there are areas that are changing significantly. Are we attracting those entrepreneurs that we used to? Or are we just attracting plaque businesses back to the Isle of Man? We had that industry in the 70s and 80s, and it really did cause significant issues for the island. And the more that I talk to people out there, it does seem that we are creating that type of area again. And that's certainly not, I know, is not what this government wants. This government wants to be transparent, compliant with all of the international financial laws. Let's bring in those workforces with those higher paid salaries, because that's what supports our economy, and our island and all of our people here. Why have we still got a Department for Enterprise and then agencies? Why haven't we got an economic forum? Why haven't we, Mr. President? I know, Mr. President, can remember the day in here when we moved for the agencies to be formed. And what we were promised was reduced staff and headcount and DFE. What have we got? We've still got DFE and increasing sizes of headcount in agencies. They're basically arm's length organisations under a department.
Remember, give way, please.
Yes,
Can I just clarify what the point the honourable member is making? Very clear. That the members of the agencies are made up of volunteers who give them their time from their businesses to come forward and give ideas to help drive forward our economy. The size of the Department of Enterprise has not increased in several years. So can I just make that clear? Because people say things, members say things in here as a fact and they're not. So I just want to clarify that point. Thank you. Back to you, Ms. Edge.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to go back to the Minister then to say, where are these private contracts with high salaries and bonuses being paid in the agency areas or in the department? They've gone significantly that way. So, well, I did.
Ms. Edge has the floor. Please do continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did try only a couple of months ago to try and get a breakdown of all the facts from the Department for Enterprise on what the true costs of the business agencies are, but the Minister didn't have time to actually do that, so it could be published quite straightforward. So perhaps if we went back to do that, that would be really, really helpful, so that we can actually see what the true costs of the agencies are. I appreciate there are many people voluntary doing that, but there's also paid employees working with the agencies. We've created the construction form. The Max, when it was alive and kicking, didn't cost government a penny. We've now got a construction forum sitting, funded by the Department for Enterprise, or certainly there is some funding. And these are the examples I'm trying to put across. That is increasing and increasing all the time. But what I see in this plan is we're looking towards the next election cycle. But we shouldn't be looking towards the next elections. We should be looking towards the next generations and what this island will look like for them and what opportunities they will have. We do have the opportunity to lead, be innovative, but the government needs to really step back from being involved in everything. We're not quite in a crisis, but it wouldn't take much for us to be there. We have the talent on our island, we have opportunity, and we have the ability to build our island back up with plenty of secure jobs high-paid jobs with prosperity for those future generations that were there when I was growing up. We have to stop the spend, spend, spend attitude. We have to regroup, stop continuing down that road of a 7-year-old report into our health services. Health delivery has changed, but the only change the Manx people have seen is it's costing double and services have decreased. I genuinely do believe that that budget for Manx Care is nearing £400 million because there's so many other pots of money sitting in other departments, like the Department for Infrastructure, and we need to get a grip and make sure that we know the true costs of health. Mr. President, I do want to make a plea. I do want to plead to our Chief Minister that we do need to look at the arm's length organisations. Which ones are hemorrhaging our hard-earned taxpayers' funding? Does he really believe they're all working for the best interests of the people of the island? When the Chief Minister was the Interim Health Minister, he promised us he was going to get a grip of the finances. The overspend at that time was £60 million, and he declared he was going to reduce it. Therefore, Mr. President, why today are we here saying we might need 20 million? What is the true cost of our core services? We've not seen this, we have no documents, we just have sweeping statements. We've had independent advisors in, seemingly deciding what services our island population can have, delaying treatments which are most likely going to cost us more, because most organisations that we deal with will have increases in the fiscal year. The other area that I think is really lacking in this plan is forward-thinking education, leading the way, moving away from that traditional curriculum that we've read lots about. It's flexible learning models, hybrid models, not 30 students sat in a room at a desk. We need to be leading this, and it's not about a new glossy building. It's about adapting what we can do for the future, for our future generations, and what the workplace for the Isle of Man requires. We know the future is going to look different for our young people, so let's invest in them and give them the best opportunities going forward. I just want to reiterate some of the comments that members did say. We have an amazing island. We still have an amazing island, but we cannot continuously be overspending and putting at risk our children's futures. Political leadership is what the Honourable Member for Middle said, and that is what we need. We have one of the safest places in the world to live. We can be the best, we can be leading, and we can be innovative for the future, and make sure that we have that plan going forward, not for 1 year, not for 5 years, but going forward into the future of what the Isle of Man can be and will be. Thank you, Mr. President.
Honourable members, I think we'll take a tea break at this juncture. So the court will stand adjourned till 5 o'clock, and next up to speak is Mr. Ashford. Oh.
Thank you. To the Minister for that very helpful and reassuring answer. So basically the intention is still, as it has been for a while, through the work of the screening board, a gap analysis against UK standards in the global context for breast, bowel, cervical, antenatal and newborn screening programs will be undertaken. Sometimes it will be found that standards need to be up, sometimes they might go down or whatever. Everything's up still to be investigated on a clinical-led basis.
Do you wish to reply?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the Honourable Member summed it up well in the fact that this is a clinically led review and it will be across all screening programmes.
Supplementary, Mr. Thomas.
And then just finally, Section 4 of the Manx Care Act, and subsequently repeats what's early in the National Health Service Act in 2001, which basically says that the Department of Health and Social Care has to promote comprehensive health and social care service, including the prevention, diagnosis and treatment of physical and mental illness. So given that the prevention, diagnosis and treatment includes prevention and screening is about prevention, can the Minister Cabinet Office confirm that ultimately the decision will be taken by the Department of Health and Social Care about changing screening programmes?
Bishop to reply.
The Honourable Member is quite correct, Mr President. It is not for Public Health to dictate. Public Health will come forward with recommendations. It will then be a discussion between DHSC and Manx Care as to whether they believe those recommendations are appropriate or not.
Supplementary, Ms Edge.
Thank you, Mr President. Could the Minister confirm, it does actually sound like there's not been a screening board, or if there's any terms of reference now, but could it confirm, has it been because there's not been a Director of Public Health in position, this has been delayed? Why didn't the previous Director of Public Health do it in the previous mandate?
Bishop to reply.
Just to be clear, Mr President, it's the terms of reference aren't new. The screening board, I believe, was established in October 2022, so has been in existence for, with my maths, 2.5 years now. In terms of moving the review forward, to be frank, there has been a leadership gap at the top of Public Health. I'm not going to shy away from that. We've had several interim directors in the meantime, and other work has taken priority. Speaking to the current Director of Public Health, who has just taken up post in November, he is very keen to get this moving forward, and Public Health will look to try and move it forward in the next 12 months.
Move on to question 13. I call on the Honourable Member for Arby Castellan, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President. I would like to ask the Member for Education, Sport and Culture what maintenance and checks have been carried out on the pipework and associated technology and the new playing fields at Castle High School. Thank you.
On the Member of Incy, Sport and Culture to reply.
You're right, Dr. Vernon, and thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. The ground source heat pump pipework system is regularly monitored by the approved contractor appointed by the Department of Education, Sport and Culture. Go on, mind.
Supplementary, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Political Member. Following the completion of the work, a construction vehicle damaged the land. Since the incident, has there been any assessment of the pipework in that affected area? Because the land still has issues with it, but the member has indicated there has been checks carried out since. Thank you, Mr President.
Member to reply.
The member has answered his own question. The system is monitored by the approved contractor that we've appointed.
Supplementary, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you. I'll try to do the same again. In terms of the documentation that's in place, is there any documentation to actually guarantee that the pipework is of the correct standard to be used for ground source heating once it is required? Thank you, Mr President.
On the Member to reply.
I do not have that level of operational detail with me, Mr Speaker, Mr President, but if the Honourable Member would like to discuss any of his concerns with the Department, we'll be more than happy to do so.
Supplementary, Ms Edge.
Thank you, Mr President. I wonder if the member for the Department could confirm that it is an Island contractor that's been awarded the contract. When was it last tendered?
Member to reply.
It is regularly monitored, and the on-island contractor question, I assume so. However, I can get that to you.
Question. We'll move on to question 14. I call on the Honourable Member for Oakham, Ms Edge.
Thank you, Mr President. I'd like to ask the Minister for Education, Sport and Culture what the top 5 infrastructure projects are for her department's school estate, prioritised by building condition and capacity.
On the Member for Incy, Sport and Culture to reply.
Currently, the top 5 minor works in priority order are: number 1, St Ninian's High School roof; number 2, Ballasala Mobile; number 3, the Onken School boiler house; number 4, the advanced Manufacturing and Training Centre roof replacement phase 1, and number 5, the Cronkerberry Boiler House upgrade. As honourable members are aware, the department also has a number of major capital projects that they are also progressing. These are the Castle Rushen High School new school, Kiwi 2 STEM block, and the expansion of Henry Bloom Noble School. You're right.
Supplementary message.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if the Minister could confirm or could circulate the condition survey reports. Well, it's a report that's being expected by this honourable place for some considerable time, so I wonder if she could confirm that has been completed for her to be able to do the top 5 maintenance programmes and what the value of those are.
Member to reply.
Go right, Ectoren. As of the 15th of March 2025, a total of 27 education sites had their full build and condition surveys carried out by the Department of Infrastructure. The completed surveys have been used to prioritise the minor capital programmes and have successfully helped secure discrete capital funding for St Ninian's High School roof as part of this year's capital budget. When all of the surveys are completed, of course, they'll be available. I can't comment on when that will be.
Supplementary message.
Thank you, Mr. President. Clearly there are some that are completed, so would the member commit to circulate them at the present time with regards to that, and also the method of the criteria for deciding how the projects are prioritised, could be the words, apologies, how the projects are prioritised, what criteria has been taken, and with regards to Castle Rushen, Q2 and Henry Bloom Noble, does she confirm that they are the top capital projects on the island and that there's no school other than Henry Bloom Noble in the east that needs urgent works?
Member to reply.
Right, Ectoren. So, as I said, the department cannot comment on the publication of the condition surveys as they sit with the DOI, and the strategic review of building utilisation and condition surveys of buildings are 2 separate pieces of work which are being carried out by the desk and the Department of Infrastructure respectively. So the condition, when these reports are actually made public, that obviously sits with the DOI, so I can't answer that. And I've already listed the major capital projects in progress within the answer.
On a supplementary message.
Thank you. Just one final one from me, Mr. President. Certainly it was a member of staff from the Department of Education that was carrying out the building utilisation reports. It wasn't the Department of Infrastructure, so there seems to have been a change there. So if it is still the employee that works for the department, could you commit to circulating them, please?
Member to reply.
I'm unable to commit to circulating them at this time. You're right.
Moving on to question 15, a call on the Honourable Member for Ramsey, Mr. Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to ask the Minister for Enterprise whether recent cuts announced in the 25-26 mandate and operating plan to off-island healthcare will have an impact on the government's underwriting of strategic air routes. What assessment has been made of the impact on the sustainability of these routes should a reduction in off-island healthcare be longer term or permanent, and if he will make a statement?
Pauline Chaveshok, Gusted Daniel to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank the honourable member for his question. Clearly, it is a matter for Manx Care to determine how they set out their operating plan in order to provide the necessary services as set in their mandate and with an agreed budget. With regard to air routes specifically, in January, Tynwald approved the Strategic Air Services Policy and endorsed the strategic framework developed to implement the high-level policy position. This framework clearly called out that air connectivity to the northwest of the UK was of significant strategic importance, that a sustainable schedule and frequency of services was desired to meet the needs of residents, businesses and visitors. Having suitable services which can provide for patients attending UK hospitals is one consideration, but by no means the only one when determining the importance of any particular route. As has been recently announced, Manx Care have awarded a 3-year contract to Logan Air for non-urgent patient transfer services following an open procurement exercise. Ultimately, should there be any change in requirements, whether this be for patient transfer provision or any other requirement deemed essential, then this will be factored into government's strategic approach. Mr. President, The Strategic Air Services policy is clear that government will continue to intervene in the air services market to meet the social and economic needs. We have a clear focus which will take the necessary steps to ensure that services are secured, whether this be for residents, businesses, patient transfers, or in support of our visitor economy. Thank you.
Supplementary, Mr. Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the Minister for that answer. He definitely answered someone's question. It wasn't really the one that I was asking. So the Manx Care mandate is quite clear that they have recently signed a new contract to provide a patient transfer service. And it also states quite explicitly the Manx Care doesn't have the required funding allocation to manage the subvention and only has 6 months of available budget to operate the non-urgent patient transfer service this year. That's what the mandate says. So actually, Manx Care are going to run out of money in 6 months to pay for this subvention. It just so happens that the airline that has this contract is the same airline his department is subventing directly. That seems sensible to me, one airline. The problem is if the budget on this hand reduces because they can't pay the bills, the budget on this side is going to have to go up. Someone's going to have to pay for that subvention. So the question I'm asking the Minister is, has anybody thought about this? Was this lack of funding was he aware of it when discussing the strategic policies that he mentioned in his answer? Has there been any forecasting, any thought about what happens in 6 months when Manx Care run out of money? Will there be an impact on frequency, on scheduling, on all the things he talked about needing to maintain? Basically, has any consideration at all been given to what happens when Manx Care runs out of money to fund its element of the subvention that this airline clearly needs to provide the frequency and the schedule that is currently operating between the Isle of Man and the North West?
Lady Shock to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the member for his question. I mean, ultimately, my department isn't involved in the detailed discussions between the DHSC and Manx Care when it comes to the patient transfer contract. I believe that's a process which started last summer. Clearly, the timing challenges are the strategic air policy was not in place then. That's something that was agreed only in this honourable court in January. So, for me, the broader point I'd make is, of course, as I said in my original answer, patient transfer is an important part of, but only part of a wider strategic need for connectivity to the island and care services, and therefore we will look at everything in the round. I can't comment on the financial position of Manx Care on that basis. What I can say, of course, is that going forward, we will, as part of our strategic policy, look at all of the challenges around connectivity and have those discussions with airlines accordingly.
Supplementary, Laura.
Thank you. I don't want to get into any of the specific numbers, which I presume would be sort of commercially confidential, but would the Minister accept the premise that if Manx Care is sending over fewer patients, that's going to increase any underwrite in the amount that's going to have to be paid by the Department of Economic Development?
Very soft to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I can say is that from the end of March, there will be no subvention being paid directly, regardless, for general aviation to North West. So it is very much a case of any costs are for Manx Care and DHSC to negotiate in their process going forward at this stage. As I say, our job is to look at that broader policy. It is challenging, and it's not just about people on seats as far as this is concerned. As I say, when it comes to patient transfer, it is complex. The need to have aircraft on island overnight, having staff and crews overnight to be able to provide that complex service. So it is a challenging area. It is costly. As I say, as far as I'm aware, Manx Care and DHSC are blessed for them to negotiate, and that's all I can say on that at this stage. Thank you.
Supplementary, Serge.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if the Minister could confirm who's actually responsible and holds the contract for the service, because it is sounding to me like it's another a department subsidising Manx Care, so we really are looking at nearly 400 million for Manx Care, so I would like to know that. And is there a contract break clause in the contract? Because it was clear, we've recently been briefed, 15,000 patients normally travel per year, and if there's going to be changes, that is going to impact that. But it sounds to me like the Department for Enterprise are subsidising Manx Care, and I'd like to understand that, but also with regards to who's managing the contract and is there a contract break clause in there?
Very shocked to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I need to make it very clear to the Honourable Court that the Department for Enterprise is not subsidising Manx Care or patient transfer service. That is a contract that has been recently agreed, a 3-year contract negotiated by Manx Care and DHSC. It has got nothing to do with the Department for Enterprise. It is separate to the work that's going on within the strategic care policy, which is a broader conversation looking at all of the challenges across connectivity. If things change in the future as far as patient transfer and the decision is that is brought into that wider remit, then that's for the future, but that's not how it's currently structured. Thank you.
Mr. Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm getting quite worried by this. It is a Manx Care contract. The DfE aren't subsidising Manx Care. We know that. It's actually Manx Care subsidising the DfE at the moment because they're paying over the odds for their patient transfer contract. The Minister seems to be unclear in his own mind if this is a strategic programme of work that he chairs or if it's something that is the responsibility of Manx Care. So I would refer back to his Strategic Air Services policy that Tynwald approved back in January. One of the core route requirements in that policy is suitable frequency and schedule essential for business leisure and patient transfer provision. So he's trying to say this has nothing to do with him. His own Strategic Air Services policy that he brought to this Honourable Court specifically says this is a factor you have to worry about when you're negotiating these things. You can't just say, that's Manx Care's job, it's nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
So the question I've got for the Minister is the question that I tabled, the question that I've just asked, and I will try a third time. Has any consideration at all been given by the Strategic Air Services Group, by his department, by the government more broadly, about what might happen in 6 months when Manx Care run out of money for the patient transfer contract, like they explicitly state they will in the mandate?
Very shocked to reply.
No, Mr. President, it's not rocket science. As I say, as far as the strategic air policy is concerned, the strategic air, the broader plan. Of course, if the strategic air policy has to consider the longer-term situation regarding patient transfer as part of that broader envelope, then it will do so. As things currently stand, while that strategic air policy was agreed in this Honourable Court in January, the discussions around the future of patient transfer were already in train, in procurement from last summer. And that was something that DHSC and Manx Care were carrying out separate to this. So ultimately, what I can say to the member is, these are running parallel at the present time. Clearly in the future, if the decision was made that it would come under the broader policy, then that may well happen. But that is not how it is the current situation.
Supplementary, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you very much. In a calm and collected and sunny way, I'd just like to invite the Minister to say something more on his statement that notice has been given and there'll be no subvented Northwest passenger services from the end of March, either today or soon, because obviously the Air Services Policy Consultancy, the Steer report, was back in 2021. Discussions have been undertaken ever since. That report's now published. So I think we need some reassurance soon after this, Tynwald, if not now, about exactly what's happening to the Northwest in terms of subventing services as per the Air Services Policy.
Very shocked about it.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's important to recognise that there is a constant ongoing dialogue with all the areas connected to the island. And again, that was reinforced by the policy which was agreed this report in January. So I can assure members that there are no changes to that level of connectivity. That will be an ongoing conversation. As I said, at the present time, there's no further agreed subvention for that particular route, or the Northwest route. That may well change, and that is again an ongoing conversation when we look at the incentives and disincentives and the requirements we all have to ensure that we've got the right connectivity, whether it's for our residents, whether it's for patient transfer, whether it's for business, or whether it's for our visitor economy. Thank you.
Supplementary, Ms. Hedge.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Minister, I think, did say that Manx Care has negotiated the contract for a 3-year period We've got the Honourable Member for Ramsey here, saying we're going to run out of money in 6 months. Did the Minister, who's really concerned about the impact for the island, for patients or residents, not consider to pull them up on that particular query and make sure there is a contract break clause in there if there is no funding for it? You know, it would have been helpful if you'd behaved like some of the hospitals in the UK when something wasn't going quite right. So clearly you want to make sure we've got that good connectivity, and I totally appreciate that we need to have that, but I'm really concerned that you've stood up today and said it's a 3-year contract that Manx Care has. We've got the Honourable Member for Ramsey saying there's only 6 months worth of funding.
I'm not saying that.
Well, in the mandate, apologies, in the mandate, and this is really concerning, and I think it really does need clarification for all the members in this place.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's again important in this court not to create challenges that don't exist. As I say, there are structures in place at the present time. The Department of Enterprise is not party to negotiations on contracts between DHSC and Manx Care on patient transfer. I did not have the authority to be able to talk around break clauses. How Manx Care and DHSC, through their mandate and their operating plan, decide to fund services is for them. I cannot comment on whether they have 6 months or whatever levels of funding left. That is something they have to work out. Ultimately, that is not my responsibility. Thank you.
Honourable members, we'll now take a lunch break and the court will stand adjourned till 2:30.
Fast good afternoon, honourable members. Please be seated.
Members, please be upstanding for the President of Tynwald.
That's the mic, I'll turn the honour roll.
That's the mic.
Please be seated. Now, honourable members, we continue our question paper at question 17, and I call on the Honourable Member for Oaken, Sedge.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask the Tynwald trustee of the Manx Lottery Trust what the Manx Lottery Trust grant criteria are, what the maximum grant payable is, and with what frequency grants are awarded.
Call on the Tynwald trustee of the Manx Lottery Trust to reply.
So am I, Dr. N. Just change hat. Right. I would like to thank the Honourable Member for her question. The Manx Lottery Trust is proud to be able to offer 5 different grant programmes. These are Community Awards Thematic Funding, Dormant Asset Grants, Smaller Grants and the Coral Fund and Endowments. I am pleased to share a brief overview of each of these grants. Community Awards is a grants programme which helps to improve communities and the lives of people most in need, for amounts between £2,501 and £50,000. This programme is funded by the Manx Lottery Trust as delegated partner of the National Lottery Community Fund. The Community Awards thematic funding amount available is £150,000 in total per annum. For this year, the theme was Space to Thrive, and grant applications could be made for £2,501 up to £25,000. Applications for this one-off window during the financial year closed on the 28th of February 2025. Applications were considered by the trustees on the 14th of March 2025. Dormant asset grants are available up to £75,000 maximum, and you can apply for funding to help your organisation adapt to future challenges, be more financially resilient and have increased skills and capacity. Smaller grants are aimed at local communities and is a light touch programme with a simple and straightforward application process for amounts between £300 and £2,500. This programme is funded by the Manx Lottery Trust from the lottery duty received from Treasury. In addition, there is a further annual grant for co-fund and endowment committees applications must be received by the 31st of August each year. The funding for this comes from the lottery duty from Treasury. Amounts awarded varies depending on the number of those households to be assisted. For more information, I would urge members and the general public listening to visit the Manx Lottery Trust website, where a comprehensive guidance booklet can be found for each grant. All dates for Manx Lottery Trust meetings and the deadline for receiving applications is publicly available on the website. The Manx Lottery Trust meetings occur every 6 to 8 weeks throughout the year, which averages 7 meetings a year. The next deadline for applications should be received by the 18th of April for the Trustees meeting on the 2nd of May. Gurmite.
Supplementary research.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Honourable Member and Trustee for that comprehensive answer. Thank you very much. I just wonder whether you could explain with regards to organisations applying for funding to actually employ somebody to do something and how that works with the charities and also with the Lottery Trust.
Trustee to reply.
Yeah, of course. So each application is obviously given a thorough going over by the trustees to find out the ins and outs of what's actually been asked for. And some applications do ask for a salary to be included within their application for a member to sustain their organisation. But it's not always the case. It depend really on the application and what's in front of us as to whether it's funded or not.
Supplementary, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wonder if there's any limitations on how many times an organisation can apply for the grant. So obviously I'm looking at your accounts for 1 year, but I recognise some of the names from previous years. So is there no limitation that you can only get a grant over, say, a 2-year period, 3-year period, or can you persistently come back and ask for £75,000?
Trustee to reply.
You're my Dr. Wren. It is possible for organisations to apply for all the grant awards at different meetings. So yeah, they can apply for each maximum amount allowed for each award at the same meeting. For smaller grants, community grants, dormant assets and thematic funding, as long as we do not already have a grant with those schemes for which they are being awarded. Sorry, let me say that again. As long as they do not already have any grants with those award schemes for which we are waiting an end of grant completion form. However, I would advise that the thematic funding is an annual event and this year's awards have already been awarded. So in other words, some grants you can only apply for once a year and there's other grants which you can apply for maybe 2 or 3 times a year, but they are usually the smaller grants which are, as I said in my answer, between £300 and £2,500. So the thematic funding can only be applied for once a year.
And final supplementary, Ms. Edge.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I thank the Minister for, for the clarity. Minister, Member, Trustee. I just wonder therefore then, because there doesn't seem to be any maximum limit to the amount of times that you can request funding. So does the trustee feel that's fair on all the other charities? Because I know that there was quite a number didn't receive any funding out of them, and others had received 2 or 3 different amounts. So does you think it's something worth looking at, that there should be a maximum amount of times that you can request it, so that gives all organisations and charities opportunity on the island to receive some funding from this fund?
Trustee to reply.
Sure, my Dr. Wren. I would say that I will take that back to the trustees. It's a good point that you've made. I will say that, like I mentioned in the answer, probably not very clearly, but some of the grants can only be applied for once a year. If somebody is, sadly, the applicant has been refused, the trustees will do everything they can to try and support a future application for an organisation to make. We certainly want to try and enable rather than say no if we can.
Honourable members, questions 18, 19 and 20 have been converted to written, which means we move on to question 21. I'll call on the Honourable Member for Arby Castanley, Mr Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask the Minister for Health and Social Care how she plans to respond to a petition about the frequency of breast screening. Thank you, Mr. President.
To reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the honourable member for his question. I fully acknowledge that the petition submitted regarding the frequency of breast screening and note that it has received a significant public support. Recent work from the Manx Breast Cancer Support Group has demonstrated how important this issue is to the Manx public. I'd like to advise the honourable member and this court that last Friday both the Cabinet Office Minister and I met with representatives from Manx Breast Cancer Support Group, and I wish to thank them sincerely for their time. I'm pleased to confirm that we reached a positive and reassuring conclusions for all parties. The Public Health team are reviewing all screening programmes to ensure our services best meet the needs of the Manx public, and any proposed changes will involve engagement and consultation with relevant internal and external stakeholders. Thank you, Mr. President.
Supplementary, Mr. Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Minister. Hopefully we'll now read it the same. With regard to the petition itself, has the Minister or representatives of the department had communication with the people responsible for the petition, and if so, when and what was the nature of those discussions? Thank you, Mr. President.
Very short to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, as I said, we had the meeting on Friday, but with regards to the actual petition itself, we felt that what was more important was to give the Manx Breast Cancer Support Group the assurances that they need, which had driven the petition in the first place. So that's where the meeting that's the reason for the drive of the meeting. Thank you, Mr. President.
Supplementary, Mr. Carster.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Minister for the information. I think we've established today in this court that the same paragraph in the mandated document appeared in last year and the year before. I think Mr. Thomas from Douglas Central had made that point this morning. But again, this comes down to communication and engagement. I know from speaking to the charity, they have no correspondence or discussion with the department or with Manx Care in advance of that mandated document being published. As soon as this became a public issue, why didn't the Minister or Manx Care get on the phone or through correspondence to explain that this is just a repeated paragraph that's appeared in previous reports? Again, this comes down to communication. What can the Minister give, or can the Minister give reassurance today that communication with Manx Care and with the department, with the third sector, will improve in the future?
Very short to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. Clearly, obviously, I'm sorry, but the honourable member might not be aware, but I was in communication with Manx Breast Cancer during that week, which led to the meeting which happened on Friday. I do acknowledge, and I'm happy to acknowledge, that absolutely comms and engagement is paramount, and we can do better, and I will do better. Thank you, Mr. President.
Supplementary, Ms. Edge.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if the Minister could give us reassurance that anybody that's got a contract or a memorandum of agreement or understanding with Manx Care, that they will be involved at the very outset of any possible changes as the mandate is getting drawn up in the future, particularly talking about Manx Breast Cancer Support Group, but also our providers of the services in the UK.
It is broadening it, but I'll give the Minister an opportunity.
I'm happy to agree to that, Mr. President, absolutely.
Supplementary, Mr. Carster.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to come back to this communication and engagement. It's absolutely great that the Minister said that she did engage and she did reach out to that charity, but I know from speaking to that charity, the first they knew about this is from my colleague from Ramsey when he contacted them. So again, can the Minister give reassurance to the court that lessons will be learned here and will be on the front when there's something like this, and because we should never have needed a petition of 2,500 to 3,000 people on something which should have been a simple phone call to give reassurance to a charity and to everyone that uses that service.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I absolutely agree with the honourable member.
Final supplementary, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you very much. Last Tuesday, we came across the concept of astroturfing for the first time. Does the Minister agree with me? It would be better, rather than informing rather than any of us informing a charity and working them up, would it not have been better for each of us in here to think about what the impact might be on the public understanding and the public knowledge, and actually be in touch with the Minister to make sure that the communication was proper first, rather than making a very important issue like healthcare and screening inside healthcare into a political matter?
Shop to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. That would be absolutely helpful in an ideal world. I cannot say more enough that my door is open for anybody or any charity to contact me and to verify any facts. There will always be scenarios like this, but as I said, I will do better in terms of the comms, but if my door is always open for full members of this court to come to me and ask me, and the same goes for charities. Thank you, Mr. President.
Moving on to question 22, call on the Honourable Member for Douglas Central, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr President. I would like to ask the Minister for Infrastructure what the average speed of car travel in Douglas and Onchan is during the day and overnight, on which roads the highest and lowest speeds are recorded, how many speed-related collisions were reported in 23-24, and what impact she expects from the introduction of a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit.
Shop to reply.
A review of both recent and historical traffic data collected in Douglas and Onchan has indicated that the average speed is 24.6 miles per hour during the day and overnight. Because of the difficulties in defining day and night, which periods change each day during the data set, that has not been carried out, so it is a combined figure. The lowest speeds recorded are around 8 to 9 miles an hour in Douglas city centre during peak times. But there are also very low speeds in Victoria Street and Lord Street and some very minor residential streets as well. The highest speeds recorded in Douglas are 81 miles an hour along Peel Road and 84 miles an hour on Whitebridge Road coming into Onchan. In 2023 and 2024 there were a total of 8 recorded injury collisions, 4 serious and 4 slight in Douglas and Onchan, where a contributory factor was excessive speed, as recorded by the Isle of Man Constabulary in coding the collision. Introduction of a lower speed limit will help improve quality of life by making streets more enjoyable places to spend time, encouraging more people to walk and cycle, improving health and well-being, as well as reducing vehicle pollution and reducing fuel consumption because of the lack of stop-start driving. However, it is not a primary purpose of introducing that speed limit, but casualty reduction benefits may result from it.
Mr Thomas.
Thank you very much. So I'm glad that there is admission now that there is data about the average speeds, because I thought at one point the idea was being given that there wasn't evidence around these speeds. For instance, the Sistra produced a large traffic model for the area plan for the East and surveyed lots of data in 2016. So for instance, the average speed on at 7 o'clock in the morning, which is a proxy for night in Douglas and Onchan, was very similar to what the Minister's just said, 25 miles per hour. On Saturdays it falls to just below 23 miles per hour, and peak periods the average is 16 miles per hour. So given that we now admitted that we have the data, can the Minister argue what and the objectives are reducing speed, this is of the 20 mile per hour limit, reducing speed and reducing traffic volume? Can the Minister advise what the target is relative to the current average speeds in Douglas and Onchan? I had written to the officers about that a week or so ago.
Bishop to apply.
Thank you, Hector. I'm not sure I can follow what the line of the question is. The target of the 20 mile an hour speed zones being implemented and the signage going in is to reduce that average speed. If we look across Whitebridge Road, including the 84 mile an hour drivers and several drivers who've been over 80 miles an hour on that road, the average speed along that road is actually 33.3 miles per hour for all periods. So it is clear that there are people who are ignoring the 30 mile an hour limit along that road at most times, and Peel Road has particular problems as well, where the average speed along there tends to be 34 miles an hour. So we do have some data, but it is limited data for the roads that we have surveyed at the point that we've surveyed them, and we don't have ongoing data for all the roads all the time because we don't have enough survey equipment.
Thank you very much,
Mr Thomas.
Mr President. So the department very kindly sent to all Onken and Douglas members a short email briefing us about it, and we were told that the impact of the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit will be closely monitored. Traffic counts and feedback from residents will be collected to assess the effectiveness of the scheme. I'm just asking what effectiveness is expected in terms of reducing the amount of traffic, if that's the objective, and reducing to 20 miles per hour or below or above is the objective of putting in place the limits.
Very short to reply.
Thank you, Adrian. I think I've said on a number of occasions now that post-implementation of signage, we will be monitoring the impact of these schemes on the roads around Douglas and Onken. And we will be looking to see what the 85th centile, which is the marker that's usually used, we'll be looking to see that drops away. We'll also be looking to see that those very high speeds, which are completely unacceptable, are no longer present in the data set and no longer being recorded.
On a supplementary, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you very much. So I think the Minister can expect more information about the existing base data, given there's obviously a close attention going to be paid to monitoring, because if you don't have a base, we can't monitor something in the effectiveness. My last question is, there was actually a proper consultation about a 20 mile per hour limit stroke zone in Douglas and Onken. That was the first half of 2023 Living Streets consultation, and what the Minister heard from the 600 respondees was that indeed 2/3 of the respondents said they supported some form of introduction of a 20 mile per hour speed limit within some areas, but they also heard what the respondents said was that they were supportive of additional road crossings, especially on side roads, and they were supportive of improvements to walking routes. Can the Minister comment about whether or not those are now just a pie in the sky? Can the residents of Douglas and Onken expect any additional road crossings and improvements in walking routes, or has all the money been spent on new signage?
Very short to reply.
Thank you, Adrian. I think it's kind of rather beyond the scope of the question I was asked to
for.
So I am not sure about those plans. I do know that there were in the original 20 mile an hour plans that I'd seen for other areas. There was talk of Copenhagen crossings, which are crossings that apply just on side streets as you turn off of main roads, and they reinforce the priority given in the highway code to pedestrians and the movement of pedestrians around areas. But I will take it away to go and ask officers what further plans they have for Douglas and Onken.
Honourable members, that concludes our allocated time for questions. Mr. Hooper.
Mr. President, given there's so few questions left, I'd like to move that we suspend standing orders to the extent necessary to complete questions now. Yep.
Second, Mr. Second. So the proposal is that we finish the questions, which there is 5 questions. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. No. Divide. Division called.
In the House of Keys, it's 11 for, 11 against.
Legislative Council, 8 for, none against. Therefore, we will not continue with questions. Honourable Member, Ms Edge?
Is it possible to move that we take the questions at the end of the order paper?
No, I think we've already had the proposal, and that is therefore concluded. So we now move back to our main order paper, which is item 3. Now, this item has not completed the 4 weeks on the register of business. Is the court content for this to be taken at this sitting? Honourable Order?
Actually, no, I'm not. I might just explain a little bit why I don't think it's appropriate that we should take this supplementary vote without it having 4 weeks on the register. And it's not actually just about it having 4 weeks on the register. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Treasury Minister for his email on this yesterday, which set out some of the reasons why more money will be required for the Department of Health and Social Care. But there are some points, as I say, why this motion shouldn't be considered today. First, the motion doesn't actually comply with financial regulations. It isn't actually being moved by the designated body that's overspending, and it doesn't come with a report from the designated body stating why it's overspending. And if I could just turn to financial regulations, B 3.5 says, when overall net expenditure for the designated body does not remain within Tynwald's approved amounts, then a report on such expenditure must be submitted to Treasury, stating the reasons for the overspend and applying for a supplementary vote. If Treasury concurs with the report, the designated body must place a motion seeking supplementary vote on the Tynwald agenda. And then Standing Order 5.3 says that the designated body must prepare and submit a motion for a supplementary vote to Tynwald for approval. So that's perhaps the first reason that I would throw in as to why I don't think this should be considered today. There is no requirement for a supplementary vote to be put before the year end. Indeed, it can't always be done because sometimes you go right down to the wire and you have no idea whether how much exactly your outturn is going to be. So kind of what's being asked for here is a bit of a supplementary budget rather than a supplementary vote. And I appreciate that this cannot be an exact figure, but I ask, is that what Tynwald wants? Does it want to give a round sum allowance to the department, to Manx Care, or does Tynwald want to know exactly how much the overspend is going to be? And for my part, I'd prefer to know exactly what the overspend is going to be, because that will give certainty, it sets a benchmark for future years, it provides clarity to ensure that the funds end up at the final destination and where that final destination is. It also prevents the risk that the Treasury has to come back for a supplementary vote in April or May when they've blown the extra money that we've already provided, and it also gives Treasury the ability to continue to scrutinise right it up to the end of the financial year, rather than saying the money has been approved by Tynwald already. Because let's face it, honourable members, this money is sort of spent either way, but I'd like DHSC, Manx Care and Treasury to keep the pressure on for the last 13 days of the year, the last 3.5% of the year, because that actually is big money in the grand scheme of things. So for these reasons, most of which I think are nothing more than good governance, I don't support debating a supplementary budget today.
Call on the mover to... Ahmed?
Oh, well, if I could address the comments from Mr. Speaker, and I thank him for his comments, because he is, in some ways, correct. It is absolutely right that fiscal responsibility is maintained on Manx Care right up to the end of this financial year and right from the start of the next financial year. However, as Treasury Minister, and the motion is in my name, the motion quite clearly states that Tynwald authorises the Treasury in respect of the year ended 31st of March to apply from the general revenue a sum not exceeding £20 million. Now, we've been working with the department and with Manx Care very closely right from the start of this financial year to try to make sure that they come in on budget. Unfortunately, for a range of issues that will be explained during the debate and have been explained in the explanatory memorandum, that has not been possible, and so we are applying for...
Sorry, point of order, I don't believe there has been an explanatory memorandum.
Back to you, Treasury Minister.
There is an explanatory memorandum on the order paper.
What? No? Do continue, please.
Thank you. There was an explanatory memorandum released, and that should have been circulated to members. And that made the position really quite clear, and also there was a presentation to members last week, again making that quite clear. In terms of Mr. Speaker's other comments about financial regulations, certainly in terms of the transparency for Tynwald, I think it's absolutely right that as we get towards the end of the financial year that we come back for extra revenue expenditure above and beyond that agreed by Tynwald in the budget for this financial year, to make absolutely certain that the financial officers, either in the department in particular and in Manx Care, are not spending money that they are not authorised to spend. Which again is down to financial regulations in terms of that. So it puts the department in the onerous position of knowing that they are allowing the spend of money that actually they do not have at the moment. And so I think it's absolutely right that this comes to Tynwald as soon as possible for the agreement for extra expenditure, not after the fact, not into the next financial year, when it's even more of a fait accompli than it is now. Manx Care have been publishing their quarterly accounts and taking those to public meetings right the way through the financial year, which even at the start showed an overspend. There's been a significant amount of time and effort trying to reduce that, but that's been unsuccessful. If honourable members want to discuss this in a month's time, that's up to them. But I think it's absolutely imperative that while in this session we are talking about the mandate for next year, the operation plan for next year, we also deal with the reality of the overspending on this year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, honourable members, just to remind you where we are at this moment in time, and this is about whether we're going to have a debate and vote on this. So we haven't taken that vote. I've got 3 members actually wishing to speak, so I'll call on honourable member Mr. Thomas first.
Thank you very much. I do think Mr. Speaker has made a very important point. I don't think we gain anything by debating it today, and I think potentially we lose something, especially as it's now emerged that the Treasury Minister was of the view there was an explanatory memorandum, which it turns out not to be, because we've already had the suggestion this is contrary to financial regulations in terms of the fact that the Treasury Minister is moving this rather than the Departmental Minister. But of course, this has happened before, and this question wasn't asked and raised before. So, for instance, the Department of Infrastructure, when I was Minister, never actually required me to go to Tynwald to get extra money, because the Treasury Minister moved a small little amount that we didn't manage to rein in from our potential 20 million overspend that was addressed in the management accounts. So I don't think we've had some assertions today that we need to be tested, and that can only help by having an extra month to do something. I do think there were a couple of moments in the past that I think this is similar to, and I don't think by bringing something to Tynwald in this way we actually help. So, for instance, we did have that adjourned motion on the Isle of Man ferry terminal in Liverpool, which is very strange at the time, and I tried to prevent. We've got that situation whereby, because Tynwald heard about something, did it in some sense approve an increase. And the other time that's still confusing is back on the 27th of March 2020, when at the beginning of COVID, Mr. Speaker again made the points exactly correctly. We were asked to approve the payment out of the National Insurance Fund, but Mr. Speaker raised all the right questions about, was this a loan? Why couldn't the benefits be used rather than new schemes? So we have to be very careful how we play with financial regulations and how we play with the Finance Acts and the Treasury Acts, and I will be voting with Mr. Speaker not to suspend standing orders, against suspending standing orders, so we can regroup, reflect, and then come back on a proper basis.
The Honourable Member, Ms Edge.
Thank you, Mr. President. The words that really concerned me when I seen this on the order paper was a sum not exceeding £20 million. But throughout all the documentation, all the debates on Manx Care and overspends, we're always told that they cannot predict, and it's the run rate and everything else. So I'm struggling that we should be approving something prior to them actually knowing what their end of year sum will be. I totally accept that the financial regulations, any department that does overspend, certainly when I worked in government, the chief officer would be getting a good indication as to what the situation was long before it got to that. But the other area that really concerns me is if we just keep coming along before the end of the year and agreeing to give more multi-million pounds out, there's no actual restriction on them to actually, as Mr. Speaker said, to actually try harder. Because all we've actually seen, even with this £20 million, is cuts to the services to our people and tertiary care. We've all seen the FOIs that have come out over the weekend, and there's been a lot of people had lots of operations cancelled. They've had treatments in Liverpool cancelled. Yet we're still asking for £20 million, Mr. President. So there's something seriously wrong with the accounting process in Manx Care. When you look at the papers that the Treasury Minister circulated yesterday, I'll have to say it, that's one of the worst set of accounts I've ever seen in my life, working 38 years in the government, never mind the time I've spent in here. There's nothing very clear in any of that accounting process. I just think next year they've got a cost improvement plan of 14.9 million, but we're already starting the year with a backlog of people in the UK system of tertiary care who they've promised will be seen from the 1st of April. And I'm just finding this a really, really strange way of being fiscally, financially responsible to the people of the Isle of Man. We know there's been 2 months of service cuts in the UK. There's a backlog, there's a cost, and here we are, 20 million approximately, and without any significant detail and breakdown. How do we know that 20 million is not to pay for the 2 months that everybody's just had the time stopped? I find it really not transparent, totally inappropriate, and I won't be supporting it today.
And the Honourable Member, Mr Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I'm brought to my feet really because of the governance questions that Mr Speaker has, I think, quite rightly raised. Mr Thomas mentioned another quite similar circumstance, and that's the Liverpool Ferry Terminal, where government have taken the exact opposite approach to this, which is rather than coming to Tynwald asking for a blank cheque, the government have said, actually, let's figure out what it's going to cost, and then we'll come back and ask you for the exact amount of money that's needed. That seems like a sensible approach. Figure out what something is going to cost and then come and ask for the funding. I'm a bit concerned that in the first instance this would appear to be in breach of financial regulations, and I'm also concerned that the Treasury Minister seems to think he's published some sort of explanatory memorandum. I've just gone back and checked through the emails. We've got a spreadsheet, a presentation on PowerPoint circulated with some links. But I don't recall...
Honourable Member, I've been informed that it is on the register but not on the order paper.
Thank you very much, Mr President. That is very helpful. It would have been nice if the Treasury had drawn our attention to it, perhaps, in advance of the debate. But I'm worried about taking this debate now on the basis that we don't have a picture of what this is actually for. And even in the presentation which was given the other day, it was a very brief presentation, it seems that the department needs a certain amount of money for certain, but then a bit more money just in case, and that is also a little bit concerning. The thing that concerns me the most about this, though, about the disparity and about the lack of information, is if you look at the mandate document, it actually says that Manx Care are only £15 million spent. So already, before day one of the financial year starts, there's a £5 million disconnect between what the department is saying their starting position is and what Treasury is saying they need the money for. And I think without answers to these questions, it's really difficult to have a sensible vote and a sensible debate today. And I think there's a risk that members will vote against a blank cheque of £20 million, but they would probably support a detailed request for 18 million, for example. And so my view on this really is to encourage the government to really think really hard. If you want to push this debate today that you may not win, because actually there is a massive dearth of information, or actually come back next month, do it properly, maybe change the number so it's a bit more up to date, a bit more detailed, and actually you're more likely, I think, to get the support that you're looking for.
Well, Chief Minister.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm slightly surprised to hear those remarks, given that last year we appear to have broken financial regulations, and the former minister didn't pick that up when he seconded the Treasury Minister's motion when 4 departments overspent, and the Treasury Minister brought exactly the same motion. And in fact, the former ministers then gave us an explanation that he was bidding for more money than he thought he needed because he was just going for the worst case scenario. So it seems to be one rule for one and one rule for the other. I think, to be fair, the memo was published. I don't know quite how it didn't get onto the order paper. It was certainly put on the Register of Business. So there was certainly a high level of expectation, of course, that that had been studied. The Treasury Minister has sent out a detailed email, and I'll just point to honourable members to say he went through exactly the same process for 4 departments last year and heard a detailed explanation from the Minister of why he was bidding for more money than he thought might be needed, because he just wanted to make sure that actually we covered all his bases.
What's the difference?
Honourable members, we'll now come to vote. Oh, sorry.
I might have the right to sum up, I think.
Right, beg your pardon. Anything further you'd like to add, Dr. Allenson?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. I apologise that the memorandum was not on the order paper. It was submitted to the Clerk of Tynwald's office, and I'd be very grateful if the Clerk of Tynwald's office could see exactly what's happened with this, because unfortunately I've been accused in the past of also not publishing explanatory memorandum when they have been submitted by the various departments involved. And obviously it's very important for public scrutiny as well as scrutiny of members to deal with this. Again, as the Chief Minister has said, from my personal experience, this is always the way we have dealt with revenue expenditure when it's been above and beyond the budgetary allocation. The Honourable Member for Ramsey talks about the Liverpool landing stage, which obviously is a capital bid, so they're slightly different in terms of often multi-year programmes in terms of capital expenditure. What we're dealing with here is the revenue expenditure that's been approved by Tynwald for this financial year being exceeded by a department, and trying to regularise that and make sure that the financial officers working both in the department and Manx Care are actually doing their job and only spending the money that they have been allocated and are not going into an overdraft, which is not allowed by financial regulations. I will check with officers in terms of the Honourable Member Mr Speaker's assertion that I am breaking with financial regulations, but if I am, Mr Speaker, surely very many of my predecessors have also done exactly the same and have brought motions to this House.
Would you give way?
No, if I can just finish off, please. Have brought motions to this court in the past, often in terms of individual departments or multiple departments in the past. Thank you.
Okay, Honourable Members, we're now going to vote, and the question is that leave be given to take this item today. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no.
No. Divide.
Division called.
Actually, 11 votes for, 11 against and the keys.
Legislative Council, 6 for, 2 against. Therefore, item will not be taken today. So we now move on to item 4, our Island Plan 2025 to 26. I call on Chief Minister to move.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is the privilege and responsibility of this government to steer our island nation through what are increasingly tumultuous times, to keep focused on what matters to sustain the prosperity and well-being of our community. From our first draft island plan in 2021 through to this, our final island plan for the current administration, the Council of Ministers continues to pursue a vision for a more financially sustainable, more vibrant and more secure island. In preparing this island plan for 25-26, the Council of Ministers has been unanimous in our view that we must deliver tangible changes that everyone in our communities and our business can see, building on the work of the last 3 years. We have listened at our Council of Ministers roadshows, at government conferences, at meetings and events throughout the year, and Mr. President, we have listened to members of this Honourable Court too. And our priorities to the end of this administration rightly reflect the issues we believe are uppermost in the minds of the Manx public. Mr. President, these are the issues that we have heard most about. Our island security, health services, housing, economy and travel connectivity, all subjects that have come up time and time again, as well as ensuring we grip expenditure and drive public services to be more efficient. Let me take each of the 6 key priorities outlined in the plan in turn. Firstly, public sector efficiency and financial discipline. This Honourable Court is fully aware of the importance that we all place on getting the health and care budget under control, and I will speak more fully of this in the general debate on the mandate and operating plan later. Suffice to say, I strongly believe this year's mandate is a considerable step forward in the right direction. The Minister for Health and Social Care and her team and the team at Manx Care are coming together and committing to an ambitious plan to drive better services designed around patients and make better use of Manx taxpayers' money too. Coming in on budget is the only fiscally responsible thing to do. And Mr. President, last September I announced a target of at least £10 million in savings for the rest of the Isle of Man's public services. This has had a galvanising effect, and our Government Efficiency and Reform Programme now aims to deliver £50 million in savings over 5 years, excluding health and care. Council has also recently introduced a recruitment control framework to ensure public service managers stop and think before jobs are put out to recruitment, and we've made the public service headcount more transparent by publishing the first in an ongoing series of quarterly reports about the size of the Isle of Man public sector workforce. The Minister without portfolio will say more on this shortly. And all of this is underpinned by prudent financial management led by the Treasury. The Treasury Minister has introduced rigorous monthly scrutiny of departmental spending last year, and the publication of quarterly management accounts for further transparency and accountability. I'm sure he too will speak more on this later. Secondly, security. The safety and security of Isle of Man residents remains a top priority. To highlight just one area of progress the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs is driving forward, we continue to strengthen measures to combat organised crime, particularly at our air and seaports. We have transferred ports officers to the Isle of Man Constabulary, introduced more police dogs, we are creating a new search facility, and we are planning the implementation of ANPR technology. Thirdly, more homes occupied. Making sure there are more homes available for all Manx residents is essential. We have approved planning for over 800 new homes since 2021. I'm picking a specific project. The Manx Development Corporation has made significant progress on the old nurses' home, with development due to complete in the next weeks. The Island Infrastructure Scheme has accelerated the redevelopment of 4 other brownfield sites to date. I'm encouraged to see the work starting on some of these sites, most notably Villiers Square. And we are now opening round 2 of the scheme and are accepting applications. Thirdly, energy security. Ensuring that the islands benefits from reliable energy supply is fundamental to our continued prosperity. This is a long-term aim, but it remains the right thing to do. We continue to dedicate government resources to progress significant infrastructure projects which aim to unlock the potential of offshore and onshore energy, as well as beginning the process of introducing solar energy and generation on the government estate. Our travel connectivity is important. This government worked closely with the steam packet to bring down fares for islanders last year. We have taken the crucial step of reviewing our open skies policy and brought a new strategic air services policy framework to Tynwald last month, gaining approval for a new approach to strategically intervene in the market to deliver long-term security and surety across core and regional routes. And yes, we are investing in improving airport departures too. But there is still much to do, and this government is proactive and strategic in our engagement with air and sea partner companies, and that, I hope, is already bearing fruit. And on the economy, as I showed earlier, I am proud of the external recognition that the island's economy is resilient and on a positive trajectory. None of us in the Council take that for granted. The Minister for Enterprise, working closely with industry, is taking forward work on sustainable finance, on a refreshed commitment to e-gaming, a long-term engineering and manufacturing strategy, on supporting local businesses to harness the potential of AI, and on the local economy strategy, which puts power in the hands of communities and local authorities to revitalise high streets, just to name but a few initiatives. The Minister for Justice and Home Affairs has stepped in to provide additional dedicated leadership to our anti-money laundering and countering financial crime efforts in the run-up to the upcoming money evaluation in 2026. And the Treasury Minister, alongside myself, oversees our economic strategy, which has led the implementation of the OECD's Pillar 2 framework, another commitment crucial to securing our place on the global stage. Economic growth underpins this island plan and underpins our ability to continue to deliver the health, care, education and wider public services we all value. Mr. President, we have weathered external turbulence since the start of this administration globally and indeed closer to home. However, the Isle of Man continues to have a secure economy, albeit with strong budgetary pressures, and is one of the safest places to live and work in the British Isles. There remains much to be positive about. So as we look ahead to the next 18 months, I accept that we face some real challenges both domestically and internationally. However, the Council of Ministers remains fully focused on delivering the island plan, making visible improvements for all residents, and safeguarding this island's progress towards a secure and prosperous future. But Mr. President, I also welcome the scrutiny of this island plan, and I value the perspectives of all members on how together we can best deliver security, stability and strong public services. I believe that is what the people across this island want to see. Thank you, Mr. President. I beg to move the motion, standing in my name.
The Honourable Member, Mr. Ashford.
Thank you, Mr. President. I beg to second and reserve my remarks.
The Honourable Member, Mr. Wallenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand here today to support the delivery of the Island Plan objectives set for Manx Utilities, aimed at fostering a greener future for our beloved island. I am pleased about the progress we've made on our solar initiative, starting with our solar array project focusing on the NSC roofs. This project could pave the way for the first Green Island Games in 2029 and will be the first grid-scale solar installation on the island. As outlined in the Island Plan and Energy Strategy, we remain steadfast in our commitment to deliver 20 megawatts of onshore renewables. Our focus on developing a 3 or 4 turbine onshore wind farm in the south of the island capable of generating a substantial amount of power to benefit the Manx consumer. We anticipate submitting a planning application along with an environmental impact assessment in Q2 of this year. Turning to wastewater treatment, we have 2 remaining catchment areas to complete for Peel and Garth. For Peel, the construction of the wastewater treatment works is set to start imminently, which is good news. For Garth, the submission of a planning application for consideration is also due very shortly. Once completed, these projects will ensure clean seas around all of our coastlines, thanks to the installation of much-needed infrastructure to manage wastewater efficiently and sustainably. These initiatives underscore Manx Utilities' unwavering commitment to a greener and more sustainable future. They are vital steps in protecting our environment and ensuring the well-being of our communities for the future. I hope we can embrace these changes with enthusiasm and work together to make a positive impact. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Honourable Member, Dr. Aronson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the Chief Minister for moving this motion. He's clearly set out a direction for this administration to support and help grow great communities, to emphasise health and well-being, to foster a strong and diverse economy, to protect and enhance our environment and UNESCO biosphere status, and to strengthen and expand lifelong learning and development opportunities for all our residents. It's an honour to be part of this government, a group of people dedicated to public service, to protect and defend what we have, whilst also focusing on forward planning and creating new opportunities for our community as outlined in this updated Island Plan. It's been a great pleasure to be part of the work across government to prioritise housing and infrastructure investment so that we can rebuild parts of our city and create an economic stimulus throughout our towns and villages with cooperation, understanding and targeted investment. Despite the pervasive negativity we see across democracies worldwide, what strikes me about this latest update is its realism and focus on delivering for the people of this nation. Last month, when I moved this year's budget, I spoke about the importance of economic certainty and stability. I reminded members that we do not create economic growth that is driven by the private sector, that our role as a government and as Tynwald is to create the right environment for everyone to benefit from the resilient and diverse economy we have in our island, and to ensure that the services we provide for our people provide the maximum value for every pound of taxpayers' money that government spends. Over the last 12 months, we've introduced the OECD Pillar 2 Global Tax Framework and maintained our international obligations by passing legislation on sanctions, financial transparency, and obliged entity access to the beneficial ownership register. We've provided increased resources to tackle organised crime and money laundering, and will continue to work with the financial services sector as we prepare for the island's money via mutual evaluation in 2026. I would like to thank all those who came to last year's Council of Ministers roadshows and government conference. Our community understands the challenges we face as a nation, but want government to lead by example when it comes to financial responsibility and economic realism. We have to take a long-term view of how we protect and develop our economy. We cannot succumb to short-termism and following the latest headline. Previous departments submitted annual financial plans as part of their budget cycle, but increasingly these were unaffordable wish lists. This year, Treasury will be continuing the regular scrutiny panel meetings with all departments to ensure we maintain financial responsibility, increase budget accountability, and deliver better public services so our communities are clear about the value of our Island Plan. This year we will be involving all Tynwald members in comprehensive spending reviews and priority-based budgeting so we can together develop clear long-term policies to deliver on our ambitions for an island of health and well-being, where everyone feels valued and secure, and where our strong and vibrant economy delivers for everyone who lives here, whether they were born here or if you've joined us and now proudly call the Isle of Man your home. This administration has delivered more jobs, but we still need to address the skills and workforce gaps which continue to hold back entrepreneurs and established businesses here. Later this year, we will be coming forward with a range of economic stimuli to enhance training and upskilling, to support our people moving back into employment if they've been off work due to illness or disability, to support our local economy, whilst also promoting our island on the world stage. We will reform the delivery of our health service, redesign other key public services to ensure the people of this island can interact with government more easily, but also, and perhaps more importantly, that government steps back at times and doesn't get in the way of innovation and economic development. As the Chief Minister has emphasised, this administration has weathered many storms and no doubt will be faced with more challenges in the future. But key to this island plan is that it is our plan, a collective statement about who we are and what we want to achieve together, and how we will prevail to ensure that wherever challenges history throws at us, we will stand. Thank you, Mr. President.
On the Honourable Member, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, much has changed since the first version of this document was published in 2021, and we often focus on the challenges we face. It's also important to recognise how far we have come since that point. The Island Plan laid before this Honourable Court today shows that progress has been made. More people in employment, more jobs undertaken, unemployment remaining low, a Moody's credit rating of AA3 stable. We are seeing that our economy is holding up. Most notably, over the last 12 months, through the Island Plan, the Department for Enterprise has launched the Sustainable Finance Roadmap and become the 45th member of the United Nations Development Programme for Sustainable Finance, launched the Activate AI programme with training for over 950 attendees, delivered the 2024 Innovation Challenge, 13 finalists competing in clean tech, data and AI, and fintech, with a special award for recognition of the biosphere impact. Completed the development of a local economy strategy, which was received by Tynwald. Gained the island global recognition, including publications such as Wanderlust and BBC Travel as one of the 25 best places to travel in 2025. Continued growth in visitor numbers, with a record year for cruise visitors. Announced support in principle for a fourth site under the Island Infrastructure Scheme, and opened the second round of applications. Launched a revised business energy savings scheme and extended green living grant scheme. Hosted the 2024 TT races with record attendees, generating spend at around £48 million across the economy, with continued growth in global broadcast, and an announced deal with award-winning production companies. We received Tynwald approval on the Strategic Air Services Policy and continue to support core routes. We brought forward proposals for a two-step approach to the minimum wage as part of this Honourable Court's commitment to transition to parity with living wage. And finally, we delivered a phase of employment law amendments and completed consultation on a second phase. This demonstrates that the Department has delivered aligned to the Island Plan over the course of the last 12 months. However, we must not lose sight of the fact that the Island Plan is a living document. While it provides a clear focus for government, it also recognises the need to be flexible and allow us to adapt and reprioritise as needed, without losing sight of our long-term goals. Therefore, whilst growth is the ultimate aim, many of the milestones set out for the Department for Enterprise in this Island Plan are focused on building the resilience and stability of the economy so we can continue to weather external shocks and grow sustainably. This includes driving international growth by strengthening our role in the global economy through milestones such as actioning plans for key sectors, including sustainable finance, e-gaming, artificial intelligence, and engineering and manufacturing. We will also look to pilot initiatives that have the potential to bring a significant economic value to the island, such as Digital Asset Foundation and the Tourism Levy. As part of our strong and diverse economy theme, we will also be supporting local businesses, particularly in sectors like construction, retail, hospitality and childcare. These sectors are essential to the local economy, and we are committed to supporting their growth through strategic action plans such as the Local Economy Strategy and the Skills Board and associated strategy. Additionally, milestones focus on foundational infrastructure to promote stability and long-term growth. This includes efforts such as the National Broadband Plan and securing core air routes through the Strategic Air Services Policy alongside supporting brownfield regeneration. All these things, alongside the day-to-day business services which the department offers, such as the companies and land registry, to name a few, are core projects and initiatives which will contribute to the long-term economic prosperity of the island. For the Department for Enterprise, the next 18 months will be about action. We will focus on initiatives and projects that will have a tangible impact on the island's development. Once again, the Island Plan makes clear that we must be operating in a way which is financially sustainable and disciplined. The Department for Enterprise is committed to this, but also to exploring ways to increase productivities and find efficiencies by making better use of technology and by learning from our industries and businesses, understanding that sometimes real, tangible change also takes investment. The success of the Island Plan requires a collective effort. Government, business and community must work together to make these goals a reality. We will continue to champion this collaboration through our public-private boards and executive agency model, ensuring we focus our efforts and funding where they will make the greatest impact. This Island Plan is not about short-term solutions. By investing in sustaining a stable, diversified economy, we're ensuring that our island remains prosperous, competitive and a wonderful place to live, visit, work and do business. Thank you, Mr. President. I support this plan.
Go on, the Honourable Member, Dr Hayward.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm pleased to support Chief Minister and my team of colleagues in the update of our Island Plan, working together to build a secure, vibrant and sustainable home for us all. Confirming the principles and strategic priorities, the updated plan both reports the actions that we've completed to date to deliver the vision and defines and builds on those actions that will be taken for the next 18 months. In the past year, my department has delivered a number of Island Plan actions. These include opening the Liverpool Ferry Terminal, securing a key strategic link to the UK, preparation of secondary legislation to provide the framework to enable offshore wind development, and working with our colleagues in the Department of Home Affairs and Customs to secure our entry points. Going forward, we have a challenging year ahead in support of our Island Plan. The 25-26 period will see us deliver a strategy for transport that will set a high-level policy for the development of infrastructure and services. We will be working with our public and private sector partners to deliver a waste strategy and strategy framework around that, and we will be continuing to work with the Housing and Communities Board to ensure that public and private sector housing is accessible, secure and more affordable. We are investigating the most appropriate model to enable us to deliver this important objective. These objectives are, of course, in addition to providing all the essential services to our customers and our residents who travel through our buses and trains, air and seaports and on our roads daily. Mr. President, honourable members, the latest update of our Island Plan reconfirms the direction of travel, literally for my department and for the island and for the remainder of this administration, and I'm pleased to support it.
Go on, the Honourable Member, Mr Crookall.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As Minister with that portfolio, I am pleased to oversee the Efficiencies Programme across government, which has the ambitious yet necessary target to enhance the Isle of Man's government digital offering, improve the engagement and experience of the public when interacting with government services, and crucially achieve at least £50 million in operational efficiencies and savings over the next 5 years. The Efficiencies Programme announced by the Chief Minister in this Honourable Court in October 2024 is crucial to the success of the Island Plan. As a government, we recognise the requirement to modernise and ensure the efficient and effective delivery of public services for the benefit of the people of the Isle of Man. As part of this programme, the government published the first quarterly public service workforce report, which provides a single source of truth as to the composition of the organisation and the contributions made by the department, boards and offices. Following the report's publication in January, honourable members will note that since 2021, government headcount has grown by 427 full-time equivalent posts, the majority of which are positions within Manx Care. This growth in the public sector workforce over 4 years is quite simply unsustainable to the public purse. We recognise this, and the Council of Ministers has taken vital action to address this rise in personnel across the government. Mr President, one of the fundamental strands of the efficiencies programme is to have a tighter control on recruitment into the organisation, which is absolutely imperative, as I've just outlined. Also in January, the Chief Minister announced the introduction of the recruitment control framework to increase scrutiny around recruitment, ensuring that positions are only recruited to where there is an absolute requirement. This framework aligns with the efficiencies programme as it requires departments, boards and offices to find alternative ways to improve the delivery of services, ensuring the most efficient and cost-effective process to negate the need to hire more staff. The framework also allows departments to adopt new technologies and embrace digitisation where possible to improve productivity and streamline services. I would like to assure honourable members that the recruitment control framework forms just one part of a number of measures that are currently under consideration by the Council of Ministers to reduce the headcount across the public service. I will, of course, keep honourable members informed of these measures as they are agreed and implemented. Mr President, as set out in sections 3 and 4 of this Island Plan update, the Public Service Efficiency and Change Programme is a key strategic priority for this government, and the digitalisation of some of our core services into a single customer service centre, which will make the customer experience both more efficient and user-friendly. To this end, we are strengthening the digital areas across the organisation, allowing us to enable and accelerate digital transformation using targeted development teams. We are also looking to maximise the deployment of artificial intelligence and modern digital platforms to improve the delivery of government services, ensuring that we both review and redesign key services will allow us to identify the most effective areas to invest into develop more streamlined ways of working. To ensure that the efficiencies programme is a success, the Operational Performance and Change Board has earmarked £5 million to deliver the changes that our public service so desperately needs. With the political oversight of the board, I am confident in our ability to invest in the short term for the long-term success. Mr President, the thread of this will hold the Efficiencies and Change programme together to ensure that all departments strictly operate within their budget allocation. We are all too aware that health and social care costs have been rising substantially in recent years. Today, we should have just held a supplementary vote for an additional £20 million for the Department of Health and Social Care. This increase in spending in the DHSC and other departments, while vital for the continuation of services on the island, is not sustainable to the island's reserves. For this reason, we have implemented priority budgeting reviews with each department to ensure strict adherence to their allocated budget, with the view to reduce or even pause lower priority work to deliver on the immediate priorities within the Island Plan, maintain essential services and, crucially, to stay within budget. Through the delivery of the Public Service Efficiency and Change programme, as a function of the Islands Plan, we will address the key issues of the day, ensuring that public servants are empowered to deliver real change. We will ensure that government service delivery is operating as efficiently as possible, embracing digitalisation to secure the long-term success of the organisation. Mr President, I stand here today and give my full support to the Island Plan for 25-26.
Call on the Honourable Member, Mr Peters.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I'd also like to support the Island Plan. I think it's important that we've got some sort of a blueprint for the future. I think that probably previous administrations have had a similar document. It's an aspirational document. The thing that I would like to say about it is that for the last 3 years, the one thing that people don't seem to understand is the bit about increasing our population to 100,000. I think most members understand what that's all about, but I don't know that people outside do. And there is constant criticism and bickering about the fact that we want to increase our population. People don't seem to understand that unless we do that, unless we get more economically active people here, when their pension is due, there'll be nobody paying into it. People don't seem to understand about the critical mass of people that we need to have nightclubs and attractions and things like that. So all that I would say is that I support the Island Plan. There are bits of it that I don't like, but that's politics. I support it, but I would like us to try and get that message out more clearly to people why we need to increase our population. Thank you, sir.
The Honourable Member, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr President. Obviously myself and Mr Speaker and one other Minister now voted against the Island Plan back on 1st of February 2022. I'm not really sure what the vote on an update of the Island Plan is about, really. Does that mean, if this is an honest update on a bad plan being implemented over a year, does that mean I should vote for an update, or should I vote against it because I didn't have a vote for the Island Plan in the first place? So it's great that we have the Island Plan here today to approve, but it's a very confusing vote as it is. I also think Mr Peters has just spoken off message there, because I thought the whole point now was government was diminishing the target of a population increase. I thought the whole point was we were having the infrastructure to allow a population increase, but I thought for the last couple of years we hadn't actually been targeting a population increase. So I'm getting confused again now. It might be necessary, and it might, but and there are other ways to increase the economically active population rather than bringing people here. But anyhow, I just thought it wasn't the message. I've just got a few questions that I hope the Chief Minister can address at the end after this celebration of the Island Plan. The first one is, has the Island Plan and this sort of annual debating become a bit like the old government plan debates and plans where we had an annual celebration of the success that had been in the last year, and the number of tractors that had been produced, and the number of people who'd enjoyed life in the rural towns, and so on and so on? Have we got to the stage now where the Island Plan debate is a bit sort of Soviet in that sense? Because that was what did for our planning regime on the island, and probably it did do for the Soviet Union in the end as well. So we have to be careful that we're not a bit into celebrating the number of tractors and the rural happiness. The first question I wanted to say is the Chief Minister actually explicitly mentioned a future for e-gaming, and it was a very positive future. I believe now it's quite widely known that there is a regulatory review going on in terms of e-gaming, so I think it would be quite helpful, given it's been such an important part of our Isle of Man economy, that we actually do have an update about what the government actually thinks about the future of e-gaming. I also think I wanted to bring another figure to the Chief Minister's attention, which I'd like him to comment on, which is that this morning I talked a bit about the number of employed people and relative to a year ago, which is what this is an annual update. So over the course of the last 12 months, December 23 to December 24, the number of employed persons has gone up by 308. The number of jobs has gone up only by 213 for some reason. But the number of self-employed people in the last 12 months has fallen by 563, according to the official figures. So therefore, the number of self-employed, the decline, has actually swamped the increase in employment. So, it's very important what you target. I think places like the Soviet Union worked that out. You always met your targets, but it didn't actually mean they were all happy out there in the countryside driving their tractors. So we have to make sure that we're not actually claiming success in terms of the wrong targets. The next thing I wanted to ask about is that as we're reflecting on the amount of money we spend on healthcare, and as we continue to give the Department of Infrastructure a bad time, and it's always the Department of Infrastructure's fault when anything goes wrong ultimately, I just think we all ought to remember that 10 years ago, when the Department of Health and Social Care was created, 180 million, including shared services, was spent on healthcare, and now we're up to 360 plus. It's doubled, whereas the net amount of public taxation, public revenue spent on infrastructure, so taking off what they charge and costs, was less than 50 million 10 years ago, and it's still less than 50 million. So it's those big trends that we ought to be doing justice to in front of the people inside the Isle of Man. The amount of money we've spent in the last 2 years since the DHSC was created, never mind Manx Care, seems to have doubled, although it's not clear how much is spent inside shared services anymore. But the amount on infrastructure was less than 50 million 10 years ago, and is still less than 50 million on a net basis, taking out all of the charges and income. So I just wanted to put that out there so we can begin to reflect. I got accused yesterday evening by Mr Robert Shaw of being an apologist for the Department of Infrastructure, and I mentioned that in front of him in the public positive action group. But anyhow, that's the facts as far as I can see, and facts don't lie as long as they're correct facts. The next point I wanted to mention is that I do think we need to be transparent with the public about where we are in terms of financial reserves, because the size of the National Insurance Fund and the size of the general reserves is becoming an issue, I think. So the public is beginning to notice that when, in Mr Hooper's Freedom of Information request generated email thread, you know, the public is being told everything's fine here on the Isle of Man, but in the emails between Manx Care staff and hospitals across, we were being told that there was a significant risk to the which might lead to financial instability in the Isle of Man and something like that. That's what the gist of it was. So we have to be doing this because there's significant risk, and we're being told we've got to cut all this money. So we need to work out exactly where we are, and we need to be honest with the public about where we are in terms of financial resources. I tried to compliment Mr Robert Shaw in terms of expressing that view very clearly yesterday evening, but he wasn't having any compliments from me because I was a bad person in general. The next point I'd like to make is I do think that we need to be careful in terms of 2 or 3 structural dimensions of the way we do this island plan, and more importantly the next island plan. The first one is I do think we need to reflect on 3 years of experience of the legislation committee, because over the last 7 or 8 years you're not anybody as an MHK if you haven't moved a private member's bill. It used to be you just had to ask a few questions to have achieved something, but now you have to have a couple of private members bill in your own name. And what we've ended up with is a government legislation programme that's having to put back some very important legislation, primary legislation. We can say that, oh no, we needed lots of secondary legislation to catch up with what we got in the incredibly successful primary legislation period 2016 to 2021, but that's not the whole truth. There are some profoundly important healthcare legislations and infrastructure legislations and legal home affairs type legislation that we haven't got to as yet, and I do think that we need to actually think about how we're going back to the government code, for instance, and having a government legislation programme, and then being a bit more ruthless about making sure that the nation develops in terms of its legislation rather than just periphery inside the nation. And likewise in terms of the way that government organises its island plan next time, because I was pleased to be helpful in terms of the Operational Performance Board and Cabinet Office, but we've ended up with an Operational Performance Board that looks very much like the Cabinet Office in terms of membership and external advisors. So why not admit that the Operational Performance Board is the Cabinet Office, like it used to be, and it's got the same advisors, it's got the same people as far as I know. So why not go back to the simpler committee system? Because we've ended up with gaps, like we haven't made as much progress in terms of transport, in terms of waste. But who's responsible for that? You can't really put your finger on which Council of Committee and Ministers Committee is responsible for those sorts of things anymore. It used to be very, very clear, but because we've had ad hoc committees for various things, we've ended up with some gaps. And then finally, I do think we ought to revisit some of the progress we made on HR, on digital. There are people who expressed surprise recently about the claims in terms of savings for digital. We're now hearing that that's a big focus now, but did we ever really? Well, I mean, that's been a big focus for decades. And what's different this time? Likewise with HR. So I think I won't be supporting positively this update, because I think it means that I would be supporting the island plan, and I don't support the island plan, but it seems a really good update in terms of a bad plan and progress on a bad plan. So if that's what it means, my vote can be yes, and so on. So I think the Chief Minister should make that clear.
Well, on the honourable member, this question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this next version of our island plan. One of the key strategic priorities in this document is public sector efficiency and financial discipline, and this is particularly important for the Department of Health and Social Care, which represents just over 1/3 of the total government spend and around 40% of staff headcount. We have made significant progress on increasing the financial governance and assurance mechanisms in the department over the last year, and will continue to implement the recommendations to ensure that this area is strengthened further over this next coming year. The department's commitment to making the Isle of Man an island of health and well-being has driven significant progress over the past year. Whilst I just want to say at this point, obviously I've been Minister for 3 months, or just over 3 months, so obviously there's been a great deal of work from other honourable members in this court, so I'd just like to acknowledge them, and obviously obviously the department who've worked incredibly hard to achieve these over the past year. Last March, the department launched the National Autism Spectrum Condition Strategy 2024 to 2034. A cross-government initiative to make our island more ASC friendly, and we have committed to giving regular updates to stakeholders on progress of delivery of our actions under that strategy. We also introduced the Carers Strategy 2024-2034 with Crossroads Isle of Man, recognising and supporting carers and young carers. Both of these strategies were accompanied by costed first-year action plans to ensure that implementation of the strategies were able to start straight away. Phase 2 of the Restoration and Recovery Programme reduced waiting times for ophthalmology, orthopaedics and general surgery, improving patient outcomes and streamlining hospital services. The Primary Care at Scale Transformation Project, in collaboration with Manx Care, has laid the foundation for electronic prescribing and online GP services, which will enhance prescription processes and increase GP capacity. In the final 18 months of this administration, the department will keep its focus on integrated health and social care and early intervention, particularly in child health and mental health. We are updating the 2015 Strategic Plan for Mental Health and Wellbeing to become a broader cross-government wellbeing and mental health strategy. And again, this will be supplemented with costed first-year action plan. After that, we will shift focus to a longer-term integrated health and social care framework, ensuring services are designed around our population needs. We will use population health data from public health to help set out our integrated health and social care to respond to our community's changing needs. Shifting care into the community settings remains another priority, enhancing patient experience and reducing pressure on Nobles Hospital. This includes launching the online GP service and embedding regional hubs across the island. We are also reviewing the delivery of dental services on the island also. Our third focus is future regulatory improvements with the new Regulation of Health and Social Care Bill, ensuring safety, quality and encouraging improvements across all health and social care providers. Our goal, Mr. President, from all of this work is to support a healthier, more resilient Isle of Man with accessible, efficient and safe care delivered in a joined-up way. Thank you, Mr. President.
All the honourable member, Mr. Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm going to start by saying broadly I still support the Island Plan and the direction of travel that it takes. This update, though, I'm finding quite difficult. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I'm not going to go through the actual actions in the plan because it seems ministers aren't, which is quite entertaining. So I'm not going to go through those, but not just because ministers haven't covered it, but more because this government has a habit of U-turning so quickly that this isn't so much a living document as one that's been electrified into movement. What I want to do, though, is talk about the indicators in the document, because those are the things I think that are quite important. This is how Council of Ministers is measuring success. So the first measure of success is 1,800 new jobs and filled and 2,500 new residents. Now, we know the new residents piece is going quite slowly, another 454 people according to this document, but it's the new jobs created and filled that worries me. The Minister for Enterprise has told us how great it is that we've got all these extra jobs. He's probably not wrong. 1,700 net new jobs and 1,300 net new persons employed, based on a population increase, again, of 454 people. So what these numbers actually tell us is we have more people in work working multiple jobs, which is what Mr. Thomas has outlined already, that there are now more people on the island having to work more than one job just to get by. That is not a measure of success. It is not a measure of a successful economy that people have no choice but to work 2 jobs to pay the bills. That is not a successful outcome. So those numbers that this document highlights to us show us there's an underlying structural problem here. Well, the government may very well be pursuing low-wage jobs rather than high-wage jobs. It's difficult to know, Ectorane, because there's no information in this document. There's not even a link to where the information can be found. This government is not great at publishing some of its explanations. So I would like to see breakdowns of those numbers. Are we right to be concerned by the fact that the number of jobs are growing faster than the number of people working in them? Are there people out there working 2 or 3 jobs to pay the bills? The answer to that is yes, there are. That is not a measure of success. So listening to the Minister for Enterprise tout this as a positive outcome, I think was quite offensive. This is not a positive outcome. I'd like to also ask about the additional homes occupied. By the end of this administration, we need an extra 1,000 homes occupied. It's a good target. I think it's the right approach. But the way government's measuring that is the number of homes in planning. How many houses have gone through the planning system? Not how many are built, not how many of those homes now have a person living in them, but actually how many have we got planning approval for? I appreciate that is much easier to measure. I appreciate that from a government perspective it is easier to say we have X number of homes that have been approved in planning. I absolutely appreciate that. But it isn't telling us how many homes are being occupied, and that was the question the Council then has posed itself. Can we have another 1,000 homes occupied by the end of this administration? So I wonder if we have that data. I wonder if the Chief Minister, when he's summing up, can advise us how many of these homes that have gone through planning have been built and how many are now occupied. My views about public sector house building are well on the record, that we need to do more of this. And again, this document outlines that Manx Development Corporation have converted the nurses' home to 37 apartments. That seems to be the measure of success. So the target here is 1,000 homes, and actually what we're saying is MDC have built 37 flats. I think there's a massive gap between those two numbers. The infrastructure and services areas are really interesting, and I want to talk about education here for a second. So inside this plan, there's a range of measures around education. It just says we should improve learning outcomes. And I actually kind of agree with that, because I think trying to boil education down to a single number is quite dangerous. And then it says, click here to see the department's page on educational attainment. I would strongly suggest you don't do that. It's a list of all the schools that we have and links to every single one of their school websites where the individual schools publish their individual results. So if you want to perform any sort of analysis to understand, are educational outcomes getting better or worse, you have a lot of work ahead of you downloading PDFs from 30 plus websites spread over multiple years. It is an exercise in futility. The Department of Education doesn't like sharing information. They've rejected a number of FY requests. They've refused to answer Tynwald questions. They are not an open part of government. And this sums it up. They say, yeah, it's all there. It's all hidden away if you really have the energy to figure it out. But then when you look at their department plan, the department plan actually highlights educational outcomes are not improving. Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5, set against 2021, the start of the administration, results have dipped. They're worse now than they were in 2021. That's what the department's most recent department plan says. Some areas are getting better. Key Stage 2 and 3, marginal improvements. It's a balance. But it's really hard to get that picture from this document. It's really hard to understand from this island plan document. Are we hitting that indicator, that outcome of improving educational outcomes, improving learning outcomes? And the same sort of goes for the crime stats as well. The target here is to maintain the lowest crime rate in the British Isles. The actual indicator now says the island remains to be one of the safest places in the British Isles. We seem to have moved from the safest place to one of the safest place. And that could just be language, that could just be a different turn of phrase being used. But I'm unclear myself, actually, as to whether that's actually a realistic change. Are we now second compared to Jersey? Are we still the safest place in the British Isles. And the link to the report that it suggests backs up this statement is the Crime Index by Country 2024, which doesn't seem to include some of our near neighbours like Jersey and Guernsey. So actually, it's an incomplete data set. So again, it would be nice to know, is that just wording for this change, or has something fundamentally changed underneath the hood? It is really difficult, I think, to understand. So from my perspective, I do believe the Island Plan is still the right way to go. I still think that the targets, the things that the government is aiming to do are the right things to do. I'm just not convinced we're seeing delivery through here. I'm not convinced that the measures the government are telling us actually show success are actually showing success. I think they're showing us something very, very different. And that's worrying. And it's not worrying because it may be happening, it's worrying because it doesn't feel like ministers have realised. It doesn't feel like they've acknowledged that maybe things aren't going as well as they hoped they would be going. We've had lots of very positive contributions about all the wonderful things that are happening. But actually, I think we need to acknowledge it's not going as well as we would like. And that's fair. Things don't always go as well as we'd like them to go. So I don't think I can support this update. Again, not because I don't support the direction of travel, not because I don't support what the document represents, but because actually I don't think this shows us the things that we're asking it to show us. It's not answering the questions that we're asking. And those questions are set out quite clearly in section 21, are the national indicators. It's posing these statements, these aims. Government actually isn't answering its own questions. And ultimately, if we're not measuring the right things, we'll end up doing the wrong things. So government needs to go back and have another think about this. And if they're really saying, actually, we're not going to be looking at occupying homes, we think what's important is getting homes to the planning system, maybe that should be a target. But if they're going to talk about occupying homes, they need to be measuring occupying homes. And I appreciate that is a far harder thing to measure. But it's the same across the board. If you're going to set out an aim to improve learning outcomes, you need to demonstrate you're improving learning outcomes. If you're going to say we have the lowest crime rate in the British Isles, you need to actually make sure we have the lowest crime rate in the British Isles. So I won't be supporting this update. Although the last thing I'll say is I am thoroughly tickled by the idea that we're kicking off an efficiency programme with more bureaucracy. I think that is a first worldwide, Mr. President. It is quite a bizarre situation to be in.
On the honourable member, Mrs. Paul Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I've been musing since I listened to the contribution from the honourable member for Douglas Central, Comrade Thomas, on where I might include some tractors in my contribution. But I've struggled, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint honourable members on that. And picking up on the last speaker, the honourable member for Ramsey's comment, I was actually going to say that I wasn't intending to comment on each individual area for which the Department of Home Affairs has responsibility in the Island Plan, because I felt like that possibly wasn't the best use of my time on my feet to run through everything that people can read. But what I would like to say, though, I hope briefly, is that from a Home Affairs perspective, we do and have been working tirelessly to keep the island safe, and I believe we have progressed a number of key areas within the Island Plan over the last year. Honourable members are well aware that we switched on new sexual offences legislation, creating new offences for the digital age and strengthening existing offences. The Sexual Assault Referral Centre continues apace and will soon be ready to provide best-in-class services to victims and survivors of sexual violence. Our constabulary continues to disrupt the work of serious criminals, and our domestic abuse legislation has resulted in many perpetrators of abuse being convicted and sentenced, as well as introducing protections for victims and survivors of abuse. And I think, actually, as Comrade Thomas mentioned in his contribution, apologies, Mr. President, the Honourable Member for Douglas Central mentioned, he asked the question about legislation and the balance, I suppose, which is a relevant question, between progressing new primary legislation whilst actually trying to implement and embed substantial primary legislation that has already been passed by the branches of this Honourable Court. And I think we should not underestimate, I think it's really important from a public perspective as well, that there is an appreciation of the incredible amount of work that has to go in when we do move major primary legislation and then we look to implement it. And so I would underline again how much work has had to go on just to bring in those two major pieces of legislation that were passed in the last administration that have been switched on in this administration. I would also highlight the huge amount of work that is going on from a legislative perspective still within Home Affairs. So honourable members may be aware that we have 3 bills out for consultation to update our proceeds of crime legislation. There is an extradition bill which is subject to consultation. We have carried out consultation on a national infrastructure security bill and on fire legislation. So a huge amount of work does continue, and I am looking forward to, I hope, progressing these areas of primary legislation over the balance of this administration. I would, though, like to focus more now on how we are working to address threats from organised transnational financial crime and implementing our Securing Our Island strategy. I need not remind honourable members that criminals continue to look for new ways to exploit global financial centres, and that is why we must remain vigilant to both the threats we know about and those emerging threats to which we are equally vulnerable. This will that we continue to have measures to combat financial crime which are effective and act as a deterrent to criminals. It is essential that we understand and act on evolving risks and threats, so that we can continue to build strong frameworks to protect the Isle of Man. Honourable members will be familiar with the recent high-profile matters covered in the media linked to the gaming sector from South and Southeast Asia, and they will have hopefully seen the statement government released earlier this month concerning those threats and the actions we are taking. And the Honourable Member for Douglas Central, Mr Thomas, specifically referenced, I think in his contribution, a gambling regulatory review. I think it's important at this point that we do refer to a written answer that was provided to Mr Thomas. That was written answer 2025-01-1448, published on the 13th of February. The answer was published on the 26th of February, which did highlight that for over 20 years the e-gaming sector has been a significant contributor to the island's economy and continues to play an essential role. The island upholds its reputation as a responsible Tier 1 jurisdiction, welcoming legitimate businesses that operate within international legal and regulatory frameworks. E-gaming remains a vital component of the overall economy, but as with many sectors that have an international focus, there is a constantly evolving threat landscape which may increase the risk of exploitation. The government must remain vigilant and ensure that it provides an appropriate response to these threats. Although no formal regulatory review is underway, the Gambling Supervision Commission is actively reviewing the risk profile of its current licensees. This work involves discussions with other agencies across government and may result in policy changes to tighten any exposures to financial crime. And I think it's very important we are clear on the work that is underway. And I support that. It is essential that we continue to guard against and respond to threats from money laundering and the financing of terrorism and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. We have already made significant investment in law enforcement and investigation capability through the proactive International Money Laundering Investigation Team, and we intend to continue that investment. We know, though, that there are other risks to the island, and that is why we have also been strengthening our immigration systems and processes, closing loopholes, and improving safeguards against exploitation. As part of the delivery of our Securing Our Island strategy, we have also strengthened security at our ports. The integration of ports policing with the constabulary took effect from the 1st of February this year to enhance operational effectiveness. This builds on strengthened multi-agency working between police, customs and immigration, and the availability of a new dogs team at the ports last summer. The permanent joint law enforcement presence at our points of entry is already making a difference. In the years since the police established their dedicated ports unit, now bolstered by officers from the Department of Infrastructure, almost £1 million worth of drugs and cash have been seized from criminals who wish to do harm to our community. I'm grateful to the Chief Constable and his officers who have worked tirelessly to introduce these effective new security measures at our borders, along with those in other agencies whose hard work and commitment to joint working enables a robust response to criminality. As we look forward to 2025-26, we will build on this work through the introduction of technologies which will further strengthen our ability to prevent and detect crime at the ports. Subject to the support of this Honourable Court, we will introduce automatic number plate recognition before the summer. We also intend to progress primary legislation as a basis for the use of facial recognition technology to combat criminality. We will also support Treasury colleagues to progress an information sharing security bill to support more seamless and routine information sharing between law enforcement agencies, a further important element in the work to maintain the island's security. As well as strengthening our law enforcement and investigation capabilities, we have also bolstered our governance frameworks to support ongoing work to tackle organised transnational financial crime and to strengthen the island's anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism and proliferation regime. These changes will ensure that we can move swiftly to further enhance capacity where required and to take forward necessary legislation in key policies. Honourable members, you will know that our upcoming Moneyval mutual evaluation takes place in October next year. A positive outcome from the mutual evaluation is crucial for us. It will provide the valuable evidence that we are meeting international standards in responding to global risks from financial crime. If we do not meet the standards, then grey listing is a very real possibility and will have a significant and negative impact on our economy. I am confident, though, that through effective and continued committed partnership working, both within and out with government, we will secure a positive outcome for our island. So we are now entering a period of intense work as we prepare for our upcoming mutual evaluation next year, and political leadership and drive at this time is essential. I must be clear though, these efforts are not just for Moneyval. A strong financial crime regime is an essential pillar of what makes our island a great place to live, work and do business. And I am committed to ensuring that we remain so now and in the future. Honourable members, I'm pleased to be able to contribute to this debate today, updating work under our island plan for last year and looking forward to next year. Honourable members, I am confident from the work that I see every day from dedicated officers that there is a huge amount of work being done and meaningful progress achieved. I recognise that not everything goes as quickly as we like or everything achieves everything we would like in quite the time frames we hope. But I do think we should recognise that we are making progress, that we have achieved a substantial amount, and recognise that there is much still to be achieved next year, and I, for one, am absolutely committed to delivering on that. Thank you, Mr. President.
From the Honourable Member, Miss Edge.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, we have an island plan in front of us, and actually it's just to follow on from Minister Pruitt and Honourable Member for Middle. I think what she's just said at the end there, I'd like to just pick up on that, you know, quite a lot has been delivered. I think what the people of the Isle of Man can't see is what actually has been delivered, and I think a document showing what has been delivered by this administration would be really helpful and beneficial, whereas it's all a little bit disjointed, there's a bit there, there's a bit there. So, you know, I just wanted to pick up on that. I actually feel that the Isle of Man at the present time stands at a significant crossroads, one that I've never seen before on my island. We've always been a nation with potential, but we're also currently an economy that seems to be going in the opposite direction and on that burning platform that I've spoke about before. The world is changing fast, but we've always been used to being ahead of that game. The Isle of Man always had the boom, next, great thing. And I'm not seeing that at the present time. We know that AI is reshaping industries, global markets are shifting, and competition out there is fierce. Yet, I feel the challenges that we face are not insurmountable. What we actually choose to do now, how we respond to all the challenges, and how we lead, which seems to be coming through now, that we need to be leading, will determine not just the next 12 months that this island plan talks about. What we should have is where are we going for the next 50 years, for our economy, for our workforce and for our society. The island plan update before us makes progress in some areas. But let's be honest, it does not yet reflect the scale of the challenge that we are facing or the bold action required to secure that prosperous future. We have a public sector cost heading towards 600 million. So today, where are we? What's missing? And most importantly, must we be doing differently to drive real transformation for our island? We have been informed of the public sector efficiency and transparency. It's a good step to see quarterly accounts and spending reviews. They're welcome. But transparency alone is not going to drive productivity. We need to transform how we are working, not just monitor how we are spending. We have committed to AI and sustainable finance. AI is on our agenda, but it must go beyond training. We actually need a strategy to embed it into our economy, our government and our industries. Housing and infrastructure investment, more homes are being approved, as the Honourable Member for Ramsey said. Brownfield sites are being redeveloped. Yes, that's good. But homes alone are not going to create the growth the island needs. We need to have alongside it a thriving, dynamic economy that will attract and retain the people who will live in those homes. Connectivity and travel. The Strategic Air Service Policy, working with Steam Packet, there has been some improvement.
Mr. Ashford.
Thank you, Mr. President. This updated Ireland plan before us today represents the continuing commitment and vision for the future of our island. Lloyd George once said you can't feed the hungry on statistics, which is why the latest edition of our Ireland plan includes concrete actions aligned with our strategic approach to sustainable development. This ensures we preserve the unique character of our island while fostering growth and prosperity. As the Chair of the Housing Communities Board, I'm particularly encouraged by the plan's focus on enhancing housing and community services. Our Ireland plan also emphasises the importance of creating a secure environment for all. As stated in the plan, we have an island where everyone feels safe, our economy is secure, our health and education system support everyone, and we have housing, food, energy and transport security. These elements are crucial for ensuring that our residents feel protected and supported in all aspects of their lives, contributing to a stable and thriving community. Cabinet Office is committed to many things that are reflected in the Ireland plan. To name just a few, under the headings within there, under Building Great Communities, the Built Environment Reform Programme aims to deliver a strategic plan for development and create a more effective planning environment for the public and industry. Similarly, the Housing Communities Board Action Plan includes implementing a single entry point pathway for homelessness and reviewing the shared equity scheme in partnership with the Department of Infrastructure. The Cabinet Office will also provide an update report on inward migration to Tynwald in May. Under the heading an island of health and wellbeing, in terms of health and wellbeing, the Cabinet Office is continuing to drive forward initiatives to improve our population level health. Examples here are continuing to coordinate the implementation of the suicide prevention strategy and expanding the Smile and Man supervised toothbrushing programme. The Child First policy for government is well advanced and subject to political approvals will be published shortly. That reminds all of us of our duty to ensure that children's needs are at the front of our minds. Under the heading A Strong and Diverse Economy, to support a strong and diverse economy, the Cabinet Office is advancing the financial crime strategy, which includes several sectoral and national risk assessments and preparations for the Money Val mutual evaluation in 2026. Under the heading An Environment We Can Be Proud Of, the Cabinet Office is committed to protecting our environment with actions such as the delivery of sustainable planning through the strategic and area plans. I just want to pick up at this point on a comment the Honourable Member for Ramsey, Mr Hooper, made around housing. And it's one I actually fully support, Mr President, in the fact that the measure that really matters is actually looking at occupied homes. And so I am delighted to say to the Honourable Member, if he turns to page 43 of the Ireland Plan under the national indicators, there is a national indicator that has been developed of 1,000 plus additional homes occupied, which is an absolutely key measure, because that for me, and I said this in answer to a question from Mr Thomas in another place, is what we need to be measuring. How many people have got access to those homes? But another thing that has been measured for a very long time is, of course, how many affordable homes are actually being completed as well. Isle of Man Statistics publishes that each year, actually in the Isle of Man in numbers report, and I think that is something as well that we need to monitor and look at. I actually, in fact, have the statistics going back to 1961 in front of me, broken down by private dwellings completed and also the affordable, although admittedly the affordable definition has changed many times since that date. But homes occupied is something that we will be monitoring, and certainly through the Housing Communities Board. I will give way to the Honourable Member.
I'd like to thank the Minister for that. I mean, he's absolutely right, and this is the point I was trying to make. The measure is 1,000 additional homes occupied. That's been in the Ireland Plan since day one. But actually what government reports isn't homes occupied, it reports the number of homes that have gone through planning, the number of planning applications supported by the DFE, the number of homes built by the Manx Development Corporation, the proposed development of Fairfield School. None of these things are actually measuring the indicator, and that's the problem, I think. They've been trying to measure this for the last 3 years and have not managed to, but it is something, I agree with him, needs to be measured. And I suppose the question I was asking is, are we actually going to see a measure, or are we just going to keep seeing an indicator on the left and some other things on the right that actually don't connect to it?
Back to you, Mr.
Can I thank the Honourable Member for Ramsey for that intervention. I'm delighted to say to him, I obviously wasn't very clear, there is a measure being developed so we can actually measure that and report on it crucially in the public sphere. So not just honourable members in this court can actually see the measure, but those outside as well. Mr Thomas, of course, mentioned about the Soviet era, Mr President, and I've just got an old Russian saying for him. There's an old Russian saying that actually said, in the Soviet Union, the future is certain, it's the past that keeps changing. I think, and the reason I use that, Mr President, is I think it's very important, because when we look at the context of the Ireland Plan, a lot of people have asked, how far are we on with it? It's important that we don't reinvent the past or look back at it with hindsight. We have to remember the situation that this administration started with, including the recovery from COVID and also the increased cost of living that has been seen as well, and that has impacted on our ability to deliver it. And also a lot of the problems that the Ireland Plan is looking to address and has been looking to address since the start of this administration weren't problems that suddenly magically emerged. To be quite frank, Mr President, there were problems that many previous administrations for 15, 20 years had actually ignored tackling and had put off. And so I think it's very important we remember that, and that when we look at where we actually started at the start of this administration to where we are now, I do actually think, given the circumstances, there's actually been an awful lot of progress made. I think we actually have made great strides in some areas, and that can be easily forgotten if you forget about the context. So I think it is important that we keep that context in mind. So before I close, Mr President, one of the things I want to say is that despite the fact members of this Honourable Court have differing views on how things should be done, and that's the way, that's the right way things should be in a democracy, and also how we can improve the life of our community, ultimately, my view is we all actually want the same thing. We all came into this Honourable Court because we want to bring about change, we want to make life better and easier for everyone living here, and we want to make our small island nation the best it can be. So while we may differ on priorities and how they are achieved, it is through debates such as this that we're having today that we actually get that change. But once the debates are over, it's actually by working together that we achieve the most. So once this debate is over today, Mr President, I hope everyone will get behind the Ireland Plan and work tirelessly to deliver the outcomes that matter so much to those outside this honourable court, that so many are actually relying on. And just finally, Mr. President, Mr. Thomas said he wasn't certain one way or the other about this update and whether he can support it. He asked the question, I can tell him categorically yes, he should support it.
Call on the honourable member, Mrs. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to touch on a few of the areas really across DEFRA, many of which talk to the aims that sit within the island plan, specifically, mainly actually in the environment we can be proud of, and often things that you don't see day in, day out. Things like the air quality monitoring project that we're in the process of delivering and we'll be reporting back on when we finish the 2 years of that trial. Work around master planning for the Coves Wildlife Park, looking at how we manage our forests, our glens, how we manage the trees that have fallen down in the storms, things that come unexpectedly and cause huge amounts of work in terms of delivery, but are hugely important to making sure that our green spaces are the places that we want to go to help us in terms of our physical health, our mental health, and to allow us that enjoyment in terms of the vibrant island offering for young people, the way we attract people to our islands. We've delivered the food security plan, we've got the agriculture strategy, two key parts of our focus within the island plan, and also the fisheries management plan, all things that support us both in terms of our use of our land, our food security, but also again in terms of how we value our seas, our blue spaces, our green spaces. We've got the work that's going on around the energy efficiency scheme, and we obviously have a commitment equally to develop a future energy efficiency scheme, something that is running a little behind, which we've discussed in this honourable place and the other place, but we want to make sure we get that right, something that's there that's going to be fit for the future, that ties into some of our climate change objectives, and also make sure that people are able to manage in a better way their energy bills by helping them to make their homes more energy efficient. Those are win-win situations in terms of how we focus our priorities as a government. We've delivered the energy strategy updates, and we're also focusing around the biosphere periodic review now. Again, huge opportunities in terms of how we value and we measure our sense of place, and I think really important, and things that we would all recognise as things sometimes perhaps we take for granted. We've looked at the Town and Country Planning Amendment Bill, and that's now passed through the branches. An opportunity again to try and make things work a little bit better for everyone. And we've looked at customer service improvements within the planning service as well. We've also got big projects around peatland restoration going on, things that will allow us both to stop emitting carbon unnecessarily and actually try and retain that carbon in a positive way, so climate change benefits, but also beneficial for our agriculture sector in terms of making our land more usable in our uplands. So again, co-benefits of doing the right thing. And we've also got work around our blue carbon programme, making sure that the initiatives that we would look to put in place are the right initiatives for our island and based on evidence and research. In amongst all this, in the world of DEFRA, we also have the regulatory element. Some of that already touches on regulation, and we've got the work we're doing around the Safer Food, Better Business programme, but we've also got a huge amount of work we do around biosecurity risks, whether that be the varroa mite in our bee population, or whether that be from avian flu, or foot and mouth disease, or pest to petty ruminants, these things that are coming, and we see them elsewhere, and we see the devastation they cause, and we want to retain our disease-free statuses, and that doesn't happen just by magic. That happens by huge amounts of work from those people who are within those sectors, whether that be within our poultry sector, within our beekeeping sector, within our agriculture sector, supported by our officers within DEFRA, making sure that we get this right, and also making sure that we're developing regulatory frameworks for things like offshore energy. Significant amount of work that goes on behind the scenes, mostly unseen, but hugely important in terms of our future economic possibilities. And I think, from my perspective, many of these things don't necessarily fall in the department plan or the island plan. They're almost unspoken. They're absolutely inextricably linked into that sense of place and that desire to make our island attractive. for people to stay here, not just for attracting new people, and we've heard a lot about that, but actually for people who are here already to want to stay here, and I think that's so, so important. And all of this stuff is focused around people working within our government, working with our third sector partners, working with our charity partners to make sure these things are delivered in a way that works for our island community. And I certainly want to put on record my thanks to everyone who we in DEFRA work with, the staff in DEFRA and all of those partners. And, you know, touching on the comments by my honourable colleague, Mr Thomas, it wouldn't be DEFRA if we weren't bringing the tractors, and we were certainly proud to step in and support the tractor run. A great example of a community initiative, an initiative founded by our agriculture sector, by our farmers, raising huge amounts of money for charity and really bringing a community initiative, something for me that sums up everything that being in the Isle of Man is about. And at the last minute we were able to step in and see processions of tractors beautifully decorated in Taos Llewellyn on the day of the tractor run to make sure that that was able to start off from somewhere. A really small thing, but really, really important to what makes this an island that we absolutely should all be proud of. So I just, as a last thought, I suppose, reflect on the comments of Ms Edge around a 50-year plan. And I suppose I'd just reflect that our economic strategy is a 15-year plan. And I think it's fair to say that even that has been challenged. You know, we've struggled with some of the core principles that are there that are absolutely backed up by evidence. But what I do think is that with the world as it is, with the volatility there is in politics, I do think we would see a significant challenge for something such as a 50-year plan, but I think it's the right ambition to have. I think actually the need to look to the future transcends every person sitting in this honourable court, and we heard some very interesting statistics from you, Mr President, earlier around the fact that the majority of us here now are actually much shorter in term. We don't have some of the corporate memory that we previously had in this honourable place, and I think it's important to reflect on that. And I think it's important that we do embed that into plans for the future in terms of our island. I think if we were to put together a 50-year plan, I think a lot of it would look quite similar to what we can see sitting in the island plan, what we saw in the programme for government, what we see in our economic strategy. Because I think the core principles, the things that all of us stood for within our manifestos or within our statements if we went for Legislative Council, we're not all on totally different pages. Minister Ashford put it correctly. We all stand for very similar things in terms of the principles we want to see. The difference is sometimes the journey that we might use to get there. But I can assure you that there is a huge amount of work going on to deliver those actions. It does remain challenging. We're in a much more volatile economic climate. We're seeing less members in each department than has ordinarily been the case. We're seeing tighter budgets as everyone, including government, is impacted by rising energy and rising wage costs. But I can certainly attest to working with a very committed group of people within Comin and the Senior Officers Group, a group of people who absolutely want the best for our island, and I recognise that that is absolutely the same as is the case for every honourable member who is sitting in this honourable court today. We all need to come together to make this happen. Scrutinise? Absolutely. Challenge? Absolutely. Disagree? Absolutely. It is the bread and butter of why we are here, to challenge each other to get us on the right path. But overall, we must support the civil and public services to deliver our policy and make our island fit for a first-class future.
Go on, the Honourable Member, Mr Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr President. In January 2003, I spoke to a friend in London. She worked in investment and spoke about the serene nature of her life. During the previous weeks, she'd seen the price of many shares collapse, and every evening she left work and she caught the train home. Surrounded by smiley, happy faces, it was as if no one really knew. Today I'm experiencing similar experiences. The ministerial statements are glowing. We are really making our island great again. Or are we? We are attracting many new people to the island. I've met and spoken with many of them. The feedback is good. The Isle of Man really is a great place to live. However, there are issues out there, and I'm really concerned that many of those issues aren't being seen, or if they are being seen, they're perhaps not being responded to in a way that they could be responded to. I just want to give a small number of examples. My inbox, like many of your inboxes, will be full of stories of challenges that could quite easily create a Christmas Day edition of EastEnders. I've got a mother with 2 young children who's about to be made homeless. The owner of the property is wanting that property back for various reasons, but she's now in a really difficult position that she's going to be made homeless. It's not the only one. I've had similar situations in recent months, and many people in here have had similar ones. A lady who waited for hours in A&E, and she got to the point where she was receiving treatment, she was wired up, and then she was told that an ambulance arrived, and so she would have to return to the waiting room and she'd be seen later on. I've got an example of one young couple who are both in work, they've grown up on their own, and they're desperate to find a place to live, and it is so challenging. We've heard today about the houses being built, but with 2 of the largest housing estates, one in Castletown and one in Ballasella, and they're not reflecting what we're hearing in terms of the optimism and things moving forward. And that does raise concerns. If I'd gone to those housing estates 12, 18 months ago, I would have seen houses selling quickly, people moving in, and a lot of activity. But that's not happening now. Things aren't quite as is being said by many ministers today. At least one local business has closed in recent weeks, and the owners of those businesses have shared their concerns and shared their challenges. A couple close to Wind Farm are really struggling. They're getting older, they want to sell their property, but they fear that if they sell it at this point, they're not going to get sufficient funds to buy a property that's suitable, and the list goes on. And it's not just local people, local businesses, even hospice, as we heard earlier, is concerned about the future. And I think it's really important that when we go forward with documentation of this kind, we keep a close eye on what's happening in the wider community. There are many good aspects in the document, but it must relate to everyone. So please let's not lose the link with the average family in Castletown, Port Erin and Ramsey. I think it's really important that we, at the extreme where we're saying how good things are and how bad things are, we just reflect on what is happening in the average kitchen this evening. Thank you, Mr. President.
Call on the mover, Chief Minister, to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the last speaker for his remarks. I think the core thing that drives absolutely everybody that has spoken in this honourable court is the absolute desire to improve lives for everybody on the island. And that when we are striving to review our documentation and look at our programmes and our strategies and our legislation, and at the heart of that are people, are real people. And this government will never forget that ultimately we are seeking to improve lives for everyone on our island. But honourable members, you must also remember, this never stops. Life is tough, it is hard, we have to do absolutely everything to secure people's futures in the right way. And as much as this administration started off 4 years ago with an absolute desire through an island plan to create a more prosperous and successful and vibrant environment, I expect very much those of you that are back next time to also want to express that desire and to look for the problems in society and to look to address them. So I do want to add a note of support for what you've just said, because that runs through the very, very heart of what we have sought to do with this island plan, and whether that has been homeless strategies, funding to support people in overnight accommodation, looking at the housing market, through to jobs, minimum wages, living wages. We're always striving to find a way through, and we will never stop striving to find a way through for everybody on our island. But also we need to understand and accept sometimes that positive things are happening as well around us, and that government is delivering on its economic plans, and that our measures of success for the longer term are being met and are being delivered. Not everything is perfect, it never will be. There is still a huge amount for us to do. And I think the comments from the ministers have been a recognition today of the achievements of their departments, but also recognising and reflecting on the work that they still need to do in order to deliver. And the debates that we are having at the moment about healthcare and healthcare funding, I think, are very much reflective of that. And of course, finding a way through in times where we have had a lot of turbulence, where we have had a lot of trouble, where inflation has been incredibly high, where we have had longer term impacts put upon society as a result of the pandemic, has not been easy. But in many ways, we have set out a plan to try and tackle that, to deal with some of the issues as they have arisen, whether that be the cost of living crisis or a drive to build more houses or island infrastructure schemes to keep that side of the economy going. So there is time also for some recognition of the achievements that have been made throughout the delivery of the island plan, but like anybody, there is still huge amounts that the government can do to succeed. Now, we've heard from ministers today about many of those areas that they are looking to deliver on. I'd like to thank everybody who has spoken. I don't intend to run through absolutely every comment, but a number of ministers, as I say, have sought to outline where they are achieving as departments, and also, obviously, the document talks clearly about our strategic priorities moving forward. I did want to pick up on Mr. Peters' remarks there about the population growth aspect. Well, I think we have tried, to refocus the priorities of this government in a way that is more meaningful to people, perhaps accepting that that figure as a headline per se was not necessarily reflective of our key objectives, which is to grow the working population for the long-term economic success of the island, recognising all those factors that were potentially going to hinder us if the working population was not part of that strategy. And that's not just about attracting people here, of course. That is about homegrown talent, bringing talent back, making sure that we've got the right education facilities and the right infrastructure on the island. And of course, part of that equation is the homes and the support, of course, that are needed to help grow the working population. So it is a holistic circle, and government has to work hard to balance the books. But we have grown those the numbers in the jobs market. We have put more people into work. I accept some of the comments that are being made about whether that now is indicating that actually people are having to work two jobs. I need to do some more work and analysis around that, although I suspect getting to the very heart of that may be a slightly bigger challenge than has been set out. But thank you for his remarks, because it is important that we keep focused that this is about the working population, but just growing the working population does mean developing, as part of that strategy, developing our homegrown talent as well. I want to thank the other members who have spoken, and what I would say to them, I think I've just recognised Mr. Hooper's remarks about the need to perhaps just drill down a bit more into the jobs issue and to make sure that we are keeping ourselves on track in that respect. But I would like to turn to the member for Onken's contribution, because she somewhat inspired me this afternoon to go on to AI and find out how the Isle of Man is really doing, because she wants to drive that next big thing. And clearly from her remarks today, technology is where she sees everything lying. So I did ask AI whether the Isle of Man was developing AI technology, and I'm pleased to report that yes, the Isle of Man is actively developing artificial technology through a series of strategic initiatives aimed at implementing AI across various sectors to enhance productivity and innovation. The Activate AI programme, launched by Digital Isle of Man, is one example. The Isle of Man government has committed to leveraging AI to improve public services and economic growth. Industry adoption. AI adoption is growing within the Isle of Man's business community. A recent report indicates that 52% of managerial respondents use AI within their organisations, with applications in IT operations, marketing and research and development, although only 26% of organisations have a formal AI strategy. The regulatory developments, the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority has partnered with RegSearch to implement AI tools for compliance-related interactions, enhance the accessibility and user satisfaction for regulated entities. Of course, I've just mentioned the Activate AI programme. ChatGPT concludes these developments underscore the Isle of Man's commitments to embracing AI technology, positioning the island as a forward-thinking jurisdiction in AI adoption and technology. Now, I also took the opportunity to ask AI technology whether the Isle of Man had a long-term plan for success. And yes, the Isle of Man does have a long-term plan for success. The Honourable Member will be pleased to know, and is primarily outlined in strategic initiatives like the Island Plan and the Economic Strategy. And of course, I don't need to go through it all, but of course the key headlines from that are very much reflected in what we are seeking to achieve in the Island Plan. Although it's interesting to note, of course, that two comments. Overall success factors, the Isle of Man's long-term plan for success revolves around a mix of economic diversification, technological advancement, sustainability and talent attraction. With its focus on fostering innovation and ensuring a robust future-proof economy, the island is positioning itself for continued success for the coming decades. I'm sure that's going to be of great comfort for her. But of course, the success of these plans will depend on effective execution, collaboration with the private sector and adaptability to emerging global trends. And I think the Treasury Minister in his remarks very much talked about the need to ensure that we were facilitating the private sector's ability and capabilities to drive forward. And finally, Mr. President, I did ask AI whether Chris Thomas was a communist. He says he isn't. Yes. If anybody needs any comment. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I'd like to thank everybody who has contributed. I'd like to finish by saying that the plan has been refined over the last 4 years, that we've set for the next 18 months ahead clearer strategic priorities that I think are more reflective of some of the feedback and the needs that are coming through in this emerging and developing world. I think those priorities appear to have been well received in general terms. Of course, measuring those ultimately needs to be done effectively. Some of that absolute evidence now needs to be compiled towards the end of the administration in terms of measuring success. But of course, we all take home the message that our job is not finished, that there is still a huge amount to do, that we live in a very turbulent and changing world, that we need to stay on top of the regulations and the governance needed to keep improving the lives of our constituents and our residents, and indeed our future residents on the Isle of Man. I hope Tynwald will support this latest and last version.
Now, honourable members, we come to vote on this item. Item 4, that Tynwald approves our Island Plan 2025 to 2026. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no.
Divide.
Division called.
Exeter and the House Keys 15 for, 7 against.
Legislative Council, 8 for, none against, therefore motion is carried. We now move on to item 5, Legislative Council reform. I call on the Honourable Member for Oakham, Miss Edge.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion that I brought before you today, the reason that I've done it is because we have got some new members in at this point in time, is because we have got some new MLCs, and I thought it was a good opportunity for them to hopefully get involved in a debate. Then they've just been through the process and hopefully could say how things could be improved or better. But also because for the last 8 years in here, all I've heard is a lot of people say, oh, we need to do something about LegCo, we need to do this, we need to do that. So I thought it's a good opportunity to just have that debate, see how it goes. But most importantly, Mr. President, was to try and align the MLC election process more closely to how an NHK has to be elected. And there was a lot of calls for people to for a public vote, and I don't think we're quite ready for that at the present time, because that is real constitutional change. So the motion before you, it's really to we've had comprehensive reforms of the Legislative Council in the past, but I want to align with the long-standing discussions on enhancing our democratic accountability and the separation of those powers within Tynwald. So from point, and I have actually split each item out in the motion separately so that they can be voted on separately, Mr. President, if that's acceptable to you. So obviously under A, it's that MLC should not serve on government departments. This was part and parcel quite strongly in the Lord Lisvane report, that they should not serve on departments. Many of us still in here supported that move. However, not long after supporting that move, things changed, and then there was more members and more departments than anything that Lord Lisvane suggested at that time. But I'm still of that opinion that the NSC should not serve on government departments, because I think we get a valuable resource available to help and support various departments if they're not attached to one individual department or a couple of departments. So, the skill sets that everybody has, there might be an urgent need, and the Chief Minister might have an urgent need today, might be a skill set sat in there. Who knows? I'm not so told him he's got an urgent need. So, but, there might be a skill set that's required to support government in some way, and sadly, because people are attached to departments, could make it quite difficult. So that's the reason behind A. Behind B is really just introducing the same process that NHKs have to have. You have to have proposals to be able to put yourself forward for election. And what we've seen this time with the process and people putting an expression of interest in to serve on the Legislative Council, there was not really great transparency around that at that stage, and it was a step that I think perhaps wasn't needed, and it did cause quite significant concern in the public domain as to why it was so secretive to have that first stage of the process completely confidential. So I think that to try and align it with the way House of Keys members have to get at least 20 members of the public to sign it, and then that's a signed proposal rather than it being completely not transparent. I think what I'm trying to get from this is more transparency around the process with that particular suggestion in item B. In item C, that candidates should be required to declare their interests before the election takes place. Certainly this is a change that has come in for the election to local authorities and to the House of Keys, and it's something that I have certainly campaigned for, that we should have that complete transparency at the outset of an election so people know what and who they're actually voting for, and if they have got any alliances with anything in particular that might make you think differently about their suitability to come into Tynwald to represent the public. And I think, you know, once people are declared, it's that transparency process, and it creates good governance if you're transparent for the public to see what the membership could be depending on people's alliances or memberships of certain organisations. So that's certainly coming in for the 2026 election for MHKs. So, item D, people might think, what does that mean? What's that all about? So no part of the process for filling vacancies on rotation should take place until after the terms of office of the outgoing NLCs have expired. I think it was more noticeable on this last election that, to me, it did seem quite an unfair process that, you know, there was members in here standing again, still having access to all of the services within Tynwald, that members that were putting themselves forward did not have that accessibility to Tynwald, to still be on that platform of Tynwald, promoting themselves to become NLCs. And, you know, I know that's probably one that people think, well, you know, I'm not going to go for that, but I felt that I needed to put that down to make sure that we have got a fair, transparent process for everybody seeking election into our Legislative Council. Item E, no one should be able to serve more than 2 terms as an NLC. You know, people could say, I think we did actually have it said to us actually at lunchtime, should it be the same for NHKs? Well, possibly it should, so that we keep ensuring that there is change. However, we've also heard a lot in here today with regards to that corporate knowledge, experience and how the Parliament works. But I think certainly for the NLC role, you know, I think 2 terms would be sufficient. I view NLCs of the future being more like a committee process, and if you look at some of our government roles that you can hold in government, if you were holding a role on, say, the FSA or something, you can only do 2 terms. So it's really sort of aligning it in that bit more of a modern approach to the way a revising chamber could look. And then the final one is serving MSC should be required to step down before seeking election to the House of Keys. I think this one is probably the one that I found in the last election in 2021 that really came to light, because I don't think it's actually probably happened many times, but certainly came to light that sitting MLCs could continue in their role, continue being paid whilst they're out electioneering to become an NHK, and then they leave that seat, but whereas we have to step down from our positions, when I stood out of our offices, we have to pack everything up and we have to move on. And I do think that was it really came to light in that 2021 election. And certainly, you know, we've got 2 members from MLCs joining us in here, Mrs. Pooh Wilson and Mrs. Lord Bennon. And however, they'd had access to everything running up to the election that other members that were elected from, you know, that were in here from 2016 didn't have. So that's the reason for putting up in item F. I know some members are saying, well, it's not the right time to do this, but I felt it was the right time to try and make some change to see, and particularly with new members, to see what they thought of the process, whether they thought it was a good process after the actual process this time. There were a few members said, you know, areas of it, like the speed dating and that, they didn't think worked very well, and I'm sure the Tynwald Management Committee will be doing a review anyway of some of the things. Tynwald standing orders will be doing a review of the process, and you know, we can always make things better, but I think, you know, the reason for moving the motion is to try and make that some of the steps forward, that we could make change in here, make it more of a transparent, open process that's fair, and there's no advantage of already being sitting in a seat in the Legislative Council. So with that, Mr. President, I'd like to move.
On the honourable member, Mrs. Kinnish.
Thank you, Mr. President. Whilst I do believe...
Mrs. Kinnish, are you seconding?
Oh, sorry.
Call on the honourable member, Mrs. Christian.
I beg to second to reserve my remarks.
Okay, thank you. Call on the honourable member, Mr. Callister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I genuinely believe we have come a full circle regarding this motion presented by my colleague from Onken, Miss Edge. I recently requested this court in April 2024 to reaffirm the Tynwald resolution from 21st of November 2017, which restricted department memberships for members of Legislative Council. As per the November 2017 resolution, it was agreed that MLCs should be actively engaged in government or Tynwald, but should not serve in more than one government department. And I stand by that resolution here today. However, on the 17th of April 2024, the Chief Minister introduced an amendment allowing MLCs to be members of multiple government departments, and I totally disagree with that amendment again here today. During the same debate, the Chief Minister urged us to recognise the full value of MLCs, and I wish to acknowledge that point also here today. In the overall review of the Tynwald's functioning conduct in 2015-16, Lord Lisvane was tasked with evaluating the role of Legislative Council, which many would consider as just as the revising chamber. Personally, I think we all must acknowledge that the responsibility of MLCs extend well beyond merely examining legislation. Over the past 7 years, I've had the privilege of working with some exceptional MLCs on government departments, statutory boards, and notably on challenging Tynwald select committees. Mr. President, as I reviewed the motion before the court, I express my total opposition to recommendation 1, which proposes the complete removal of MLC from government departments. Given the fact that we currently have several MHKs not engaged in department roles or serving on statutory boards at the moment, MLCs have played a vital role in fulfilling those gaps during this administration. However, I still believe that MLCs should be limited to serving in only one government department or on one statutory board at a time, such as Manx Utilities or the Post Office. Furthermore, I agree that membership of departments should always be made up of the majority of MHKs, as they are the publicly accountable for the decisions made both within government departments and in this honourable court. Regarding recommendation 2, I find the logic behind this option questionable, as it may lead to significant issues in the future. We all recognise and acknowledge that MHKs require at least 20 signatures when standing for election for the House of Keys. However, ultimately, it is down to the constituency to decide who serves in the other place for a 5-year term. I would also like to ask my colleague from Onken what would happen if we were to accept this recommendation this afternoon, especially if in the next election for MLCs, a candidate gathers the required 20 signatures from families and friends, but then gathers no further support or endorsement from the publicly elected MHKs? Would that application become disqualified? If so, that would raise further questions and concerns. Alternatively, if my colleague is suggesting that once an individual secures 20 signatures, do they automatically proceed to the vote in the House of Keys? I do apologise to my colleague from Onken, but this recommendation simply makes no sense, and it needs full investigation and conclusion before I can support it, but at this moment in time, it just doesn't make sense. I am, however, pleased to support recommendation 3 concerning MLCs declaring any conflicts of interest before an election takes place. I think that sounds a sensible move. As for the proposal to limit MLCs to no more than 2 terms, again, I cannot support that recommendation. However, I would be fully supportive of any motion that restricted the role of President to no more than 2 terms of office. This is simply because I've always seen the role of the President of Tynwald very much as an honorary position, typically held towards the end of a very long and distinguished career. That's my view. Some may disagree, but I think it is. It's an honorary position, and it normally held at the end of someone's distinguished career, and I think the pictures on the wall tells you that. This position is significantly different than that from the Speaker of the House of Keys, who is elected amongst the publicly elected members of the lower chamber. Mr. President, moreover, I cannot support the final recommendation that supports the suggested MLC should step down before contesting an election for the House of Keys. In my own personal experience, I did not have to resign from my position within the private sector until I was publicly elected in 2016. It seems unjust to require MLCs to do the same in order to participate in future House of Keys elections. Additionally, if we were to support that, how will this actually look on the local authority representatives who are permitted to stand in April's 2025 local authority election, but with some of them knowing they are planning to contest the general election in the House of Keys in 2026, which will have significant costs attached should there be any re-elections or by-elections to be held. We must ensure fairness, and for this reason I cannot support that recommendation at this time. In closing, Mr. President, engaging in debate every 6 to 12 months regarding the role of the Legislative Council is unproductive. This issue needs to be resolved as quickly as possible. My colleague from Douglas Central, Mr. Thomas, started this conversation back in 2015 when he called for an independent review to examine the functioning of the branches of Tynwald and to explore options for reform. Mr. President, the Manx government commissioned Lord Lisvane to conduct a review, and his report was published in June 2016. Lord Lisvane made several recommendations and observations, some of which have already been implemented. Notably, these include members of Legislative Council are not permitted to vote on the appointment of a Chief Minister or on any vote of no confidence concerning a Chief Minister. However, there are further recommendations that Lord Lisvane has made that have yet to be implemented. Therefore, we face a choice here tonight. Either we must present additional, genuine proposals for reform of our Legislative Council, or we simply draw a line in the sand today and start to refocus on those responsibilities that have just been outlined in the Island Plan. Thank you, Mr. President.
On the Honourable Member, Dr. Allinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I'd like to welcome those new members to the Legislative Council and also those returning members and the existing members. I apologise that your first sitting and perhaps your first maiden speech is going to have to justify your very existence. But if I could say that actually with my time in this honourable court, I've very much valued members of the Legislative Council. In terms of the Honourable Member for Onken's motion, and I think the other Honourable Member for Onken to go through these, I can't support any of these really going forward. The role of MLCs in terms of bringing legislation through is extremely important in terms of that scrutiny, and so being assigned and aligned with the government department, understanding the policy decisions that have been made and the strategies that lead to that legislation in the first place is really important, and that extra scrutiny is very much appreciated. Again, we've separated out the way that MLCs are appointed and elected by the House of Keys. And so the honourable member from Franken's proposal that they get support 20 members of the public, does that mean 20 members of theoretically anywhere in the island? Do those members have to be related? Do they have to be on the electoral roll? Why would they have to be? Theoretically, it could be almost anyone that could sign that. So I don't think that helps in terms of the transparency that she says that she wants. Declaring your interest, well, that's up to the Tynwald Standards Committee. That makes absolutely obvious sense for anyone standing for public office. And in terms of having to resign or having to step down, I think some of these, whilst I can understand her objectives, actually practically cause some real problems in terms of continuity of them. I'd like to thank her for announcing that she won't be standing in next year's election, because then she'll have served 2 terms. But actually, if we are going to bring in something like that, that should be for all elected members, not just those for the Legislative Council. It should be for all members. And at the start of this sitting, Mr. President, you talked about the loss of institutional knowledge, the loss of those people who have served in both chambers. And I think that by restricting people just to two terms, you might lose further that institutional knowledge and actually deprive those people who want to stand for the betterment of the country from doing so. So going back to, again, the honourable member for Onchan, Mr Callister's comments about Lord Lisfane. I had the honour, the privilege, and the very odd experience of sitting on that committee, and there were some of his recommendations that were not supported by the committee. That's absolutely right, and they were not brought forward to Tynwald for voting. Lord Lisfane's report was of another time, at a time that when the female representation in the House of Keys was at the same level as Iran, as I remember, and we've made significant inroads with that. We've also made significant changes with the way that people can apply to join the Legislative Council, that the votes are transparent, that the process is far more transparent and far more open. And certainly I've been absolutely heartened by the number of people and the experience of those people standing for the Legislative Council, and long may that continue. So I think the debates like this, I hope, will not put off anyone standing for the Legislative Council in the future, and I welcome those people who've been brave enough to put themselves up and have now been selected to join the upper chamber. Yeah. With that, Mr President, I thank the member for bringing this motion, but I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the Honourable Member, Mr Morehouse. Would you indicate? I call the Honourable Member, Mr Ashford.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Many of my views in relation to Legislative Council are long on record. And I've long said many times over the years that it's not really in the life of administration until we've actually debated the steam packet, Manx Radio, local government reform and Legislative Council. Well, this was the one I thought maybe this administration would get away without, but here we are, so we've pretty much got the tick list again. Just need a good old Manx Radio debate, and then we've got the full lot. Turning to the actual motion itself, Mr President, in terms of MLCs not serving on government departments, I'm going to shock a few people now. I've actually changed my views on this, because I've always been quite firm when I spoke in the Lisfane debate that I wasn't supportive of MLCs being on government departments. I saw their role more as being scrutiny and potentially, certainly in the submission I made to Lord Lisfane, them chairing the scrutiny committees. My experience over the last 3 years has changed my views somewhat on that, because I've found that the MLCs have actually been a very responsive and very important part of debate within the departments. They've brought that scrutiny principle into the departments. And to be frank, you know, there hasn't been enough MHKs to go round all the departments at certain times. So there has been the necessity, particularly when the Government Departments Act of 1987 requires that there is a department member, for there to be that fallback of MLCs. So actually this is one of those rare occasions where my views have shifted, and I actually think that saying they shouldn't under any circumstances serve on government departments perhaps is not the right approach. One thing I am in favour of, though, is where a vacancy comes up in a government department, all the MHKs being consulted first to see if there are any MHKs that wish to take up that position. But in the event that there's not, then I do not see the problem with my experience over the last few years of MLCs serving within those departments. And I think as well they bring a different viewpoint to it. And that's certainly been my experience. In terms of candidates should not be proposed unless they have the support of at least 20 members of the public. I mean, for MLCs, that sounds like it would be 20 members of the public anywhere in the island. When we get proposed, of course, we have to do it off the electoral roll in our constituency. If it's 20 members of the public across the island, with most people, just friends and family down the pub, they'll have the 20 signatures to be able to stand. I actually think getting an MHK to propose second you and to a centres of MHKs is actually harder, to be honest. And I think a lot of people who've stood for MLC either successfully or unsuccessfully would probably agree with that. That was the hardest part for them, is getting that threshold of the 4 MHKs. Having said that, though, I do believe still that at some point we need to find some way of democratic elections to the Legislative Council. I know the argument that always comes up every time is that then you'll end up with a friction between 2 elected chambers. There are literally dozens upon dozens of countries that have different versions of 2 chambers that are publicly elected, and the 2 chambers manage to coexist. So for me that argument has never stacked up, but of course this is one of those debates that actually every time it's raised no one can ever agree on a system, and I'm beginning to come to the conclusion it probably won't be settled in my lifetime the way that it goes every time. But I'm not sure I can support the 20 members of the public, because I'm not sure what it actually adds, because it doesn't show democratic legitimacy, because there's then no vote by the public on the other candidates. You're just getting 20 people to say, well, he's a good bloke, or she's a nice lady, I'll put them up. At least with us, we've collected those 20 signatures, but that doesn't get us elected. We then have to go out to the wider electorate in our constituency and get voted in. Candidates being required to declare their interests before the election takes place, I can support that. I think that, from my point of view, is absolutely fine. Prospective MHKs have to do that at the point that they actually stand for election. And I don't see why, once someone is a candidate for Legislative Council, that is an actual issue. In terms of no part of the process of filling vacancies on rotation should take place until after the term of office the outgoing MLCs have expired. The problem I would see with that is if you actually translate the process where it is now and how long it takes, and particularly with the added, forgive my phrase, speed dating bit, which is the way I describe it, that we've inserted now as well, at this process, if we're going to keep that, actually it would mean that Legislative Council would be substantially down in membership for a substantial period of time. And that could actually cause problems both with quoracy within Legislative Council, and also, if you've got important bills going through, the ability for those bills to continue. So I do worry about that. I think where we've got it now is actually about right, where we have that couple of weeks potentially, or week after the vacancy, the seats have been vacated, to the actual election. So in terms of no one being able to serve more than 2 terms as an MLC, again, I'd be interested to know how that works in practice, because it sounds really, really simple, but then that's not always the case. So, for instance, the Honourable Member for Unk and the Mover quoted about our 2 colleagues here in House of Keys who came in from Legislative Council into House of Keys. But it reminded me that, if I remember rightly, Ms Poole Wilson came in at a by-election for Legislative Council. So would that count as 1 term or 2 terms? So do we take, for instance, the system of the US President, where they're limited to 2 terms, and if they've served previously over half the term, that counts as a term. If they've served under, it doesn't count as a term. There's rules like that, because you can actually have, for whatever reason, vacancies due to people resigning or debts to fill vacancies. So I need to know a bit more about how that's going to work. But also, you do actually end up, as has already been said, with a lack of corporate knowledge, and that can be actually quite dangerous. And if you end up with too much turnover too quickly, then you actually end up with problems. And you could see a situation where effectively, because of the way we stagger elections, you could end up with pretty much the whole legislative council changed in one parliamentary term. And that would actually worry me. So I'm not at the moment convinced about that more than 2 terms. In terms of serving MLC should only be required to step down before seeking election to the House of Keys. I'll be honest, I've never really thought much about this. I mean, it has been done in the past. A former member of both the House of Keys and Legislative Council, Leonard Singer, did just that. Mr Singer stood down from Legislative Council to seek election to the Keys, and on that occasion actually was unsuccessful. But I don't actually see the issue with having sitting members of Legislative Council stand for House of Keys while still as members of Legislative Council. It's a different role, it's a different job, and in terms of what they actually have access for during the period of the dissolution of the House of Keys, I don't see how it gives them an unfair advantage. In fact, if anything, the more I've thought about this since this motion appeared on the paper, I actually think them being a sitting member of Legislative Council could actually be a disadvantage to them as a candidate, because they're seen as part of the system in here, despite the fact they haven't had any of the democratic say within the House of Keys. So actually, I'm not sure them being a sitting member of Legislative Council at the time of the election is any form of great advantage. So I can understand where the Honourable Member for Onken's coming from with the motion, and like I said, my personal view hasn't changed in the fact I do think longer term into the future we need to find some way of public elections to Legislative Council. But I do worry that with a lot of this, and particularly the way the motion's phrased as well, as in should with a lot of these, I think there's other things and wider things that need to be thought about, particularly with the 2-term limit. So at the current moment, with the way this is phrased, I don't think I will be able to support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Honourable Member, Mrs. Kiddish.
Thank you, Mr. President. Whilst clearly democracy should evolve, we shouldn't stand still. I'm still failing. I've just got rid of my L plates. New members. It's only 8 years since the second report of the Select Committee on the Functioning of Tynwald for Legislative Council 2017-18, and that considered some of the issues that are being addressed here. I do feel rather disappointed with the timing of this motion, given it is the first sitting of 3 new council members. I accept what the mover said, but I don't agree. And like Minister Allinson, I offer my welcome to those new members. On to the motion. Part A of the motion seeks that MLC should not serve on government departments, and I'd just like to quote a short section of paragraph 15 of the earlier referenced Select Committee report, which stated that it's acknowledged that the strength of our system is that it allows criticism of government without fear of a loss of a job in a department. The apparent lack of formal separation of powers conceals a strong tradition of independence amongst members of Tynwald that was not sufficiently reflected in the Lord Lisvane's report. Neither did he refer to the non-existence of any party-based whip in government, which allows considerable latitude for members of Tynwald who have government jobs to propose government policy. And we believe that the wide participation of Tynwald members in government must be balanced by an understanding that they still have a duty to effectively scrutinise and may criticise policies and areas of government that they are not directly involved in. And this, to me, just demonstrates the freedom of Legislative Council members to challenge government. Therefore, I believe any proposal not to allow council members to serve on government departments is what the first recommendation in that report delivered, and it stated the government must not automatically have a majority in Tynwald or the House of Keys as a result of the number of ministers and department members there present. And this had never been previously articulated, but there has been a long understanding that the government block vote on any issue should have been minority in Tynwald. I did have a recent opportunity to network with other parliamentarians last week from across the Commonwealth, and that revealed to me one parliament where this is a real situation. There's no opportunity to overturn government as they have the block vote. My life would be far less hectic without departmental work, but being part of a small jurisdiction, many hands make light work. I believe in trying to make an effective difference based on the skills and experience that one can bring to the department that I'm currently in. But I will challenge readily and scrutinise the work of the department whilst bringing expertise and experience, all in an endeavour to deliver improved outcomes for the benefit of the Isle of Man. I do respect what the mover said about being free of departments would allow an opportunity to utilise skills across government, and I think the mover is bringing a vision of project work for MLCs by utilising their skills and experience effectively, as this is a conversation I recall with the mover in 2023, but this is not what this motion states. The second part, B, with regard to 20 members of the public, I ask what value does this add? Is this an attempt to create some sort of democratically elected endorsement? Just by way of example, I've had to previously endorse quite a few applications for one particular family member for local authority elections. Now, if I didn't endorse that, it would rather create familial conflict if I declined. So I've endorsed it. Whether I approve, did I vote? Who knows? The very recent benefit of listening to the experiences of a large number of voices from different unicameral and bicameral parliaments from across the Commonwealth last week, it was a revelation for most of those to learn that we actually have a tricameral parliament, and that had to be explained. But it's also interesting to learn about the different election methods for second or upper chambers, ranging from appointments by presidents or prime ministers to directly elected by the public to our own current system. Where there were systems of indirectly elected members, the phrase that was repeated was to have a revising chamber which did not conflict with the democratically elected House. And I just heard what the Honourable Member Mr Ashford said, and it's quite right that is there any perfect solution? It's very difficult to know. But that was, the House of Lords is currently looking at some reform in the UK, and that was their argument, that they didn't want to be in conflict with the House of Commons and felt that barriers would impede progress. Declaring of interest is never a bad thing, and I do support this part of it. Accountability, transparency and integrity of the role is imperative. With regard to Part D, not filling vacancies on rotation until outgoing MLCs have expired, I understand this, and it's very awkward for those who are restanding, and actually that awkwardness transfers, I think, to all council members who are not having to restand. It just feels like a very difficult, awkward environment. Perhaps there should be consideration to a different timing. Again, I know what Mr Ashford said, thinks that probably works quite well, but perhaps we should consider something different. Clearly, we wouldn't want that to impact on the work that we undertake. With regard to not being able to serve for more than 2 terms as an MLC, having just come from a visit to Westminster, as you'll all be aware, House of Lords members' life peers with currently no retirement age, and that is being looked at, simply because they have 829 members currently in the House of Lords. Whether they remain effective throughout, I'm not to be the judge of that, but it does take time to learn the political and parliamentary system, and also to acquire corporate memory. And if the direction of travel is that fewer or no Keys members will be elected into Legislative Council, then without that there is a loss of experienced parliamentarians. Or is that the drive of this motion, to not have that level of experience? If a person is delivering value, experience, integrity, impartiality and diversity to the role, it is for Keys members to determine if that person is delivering what they expected for that role. For me, it's too black and white to restrict membership to 2 terms, in my opinion. The decision should be person-centred, with a decision about the best person for the role. The mover stated a vision for MLC roles is being akin to non-executive director roles, if I understood that correctly. This is Parliament, it's not a corporate environment. Many government departments already have non-executive roles, and they bring relevant expertise to those areas. They don't need additional non-executive roles from parliamentarians. And with regard to requiring MLCs to step down before election, I don't really have a view on that. But if constitutional change is sought, then this should be, in my view, the role of committee work, which can deliver a detailed, balanced and evidence-based report with recommendations. But I'm not saying that this should be the direction of travel now. I do firmly believe that we need to be focused on some outcomes for the Isle of Man. The mover says that the issue is the lack of public vote for the role, but then the motion has veered us off into various other directions. In conclusion, Mr President, I do not consider that I can support this motion in this form today.
Go on, the Honourable Member, Mr Crane.
I recognise that the mandate of the directly elected House of Keys is very much stronger than the indirectly elected Legislative Council, and I am open to reform of the Legislative Council and the method of election of its members. At the same time, I've always felt and witnessed over the years, we've talked about corporate memory this morning, I first sat in the House of Keys when I was in the 6th form, so this is well over 50 years ago since I sat in there. When I first brought my then girlfriend, now my current wife, to the Isle of Man, as a 19-year-old, I took her into the Keys and said, one day I'd love to stand for this. Okay, so I've been following Tynwald for a long, long, long time. I have always felt and witnessed over the years that Tynwald and its branches are at our worst when we're focusing on internal issues. We lose it really there. I feel able to speak impartially on the issue because I do not intend to seek re-election to the Legislative Council when my term of office ends in 2028. And just to stop rumours, that doesn't mean I'm standing for the Keys. When it comes to constitutional change, and I believe that the amendments amount to that, I would prefer to see a much more formal approach. Suggestions of maybe committees, panels, whatever. Indeed, I believe that constitutional change should require a 2/3 majority, or something approaching that, so that such decisions are settled and not keep returning to them. In my experience, this is standard across most outside organisations, whether they're sports organisations or social bodies or whatever. On the specific motions and amendments to follow this afternoon, some of which are perhaps piecemeal, maybe even pick and mix from some of the comments that have been made already, some maybe of more limited consequence, I would venture to offer the following selective observations. The proposal that candidates for Legislative Council should have the support of at least 20 members of the public has been mentioned by a number of members. It then appears, to my mind, to move candidates towards establishing a public support base for their candidacy. It almost invites them to create policies to take forward to persuade 20 people, unless they've got enough relatives, that is. But it sort of politicises the role. And so would the idea of having a manifesto, which may come forward later. I believe this very position would compromise the existing indirect election by the House of Keys, which I regard as a strength of our tricameral parliament. When I'm asked to answer questions about how Tynwald compares with the United Kingdom parliamentary system, and I've got daughters who live away, so I'm often away and get introduced as Paul's in the Parliament of the Isle of Man, I get asked about. When I'm asked to answer questions about how Tynwald compares with the UK parliamentary system, I meet universal approval of how our second chamber is established. Okay, in comparison with the House of Lords, people get it. It's okay, so the elected people choose the unelected or indirectly elected people. It makes sense to them. The proposal that MLCs should not serve on government departments appears simultaneously to tie the hands of both the Legislative Council members and of the departments. If the Keys have elected somebody with a wealth of qualification, knowledge and extensive experience in a specific area, why would we not want to make full use of them? Again, I see it as one of the remarkable strengths of Tynwald that every member can contribute to government in a small and limited way. The departments are stronger for their contributions and for their internal scrutiny. MLCs, even if they have a delegated responsibility in a department, will always have a limited role and will be outnumbered by MHKs. And I fully accepted the advice offered by Mr. Speaker when I was first indirectly elected, that quote, and I hope I get this right, Ewan, it would not be appropriate for a member of Legislative Council to take the lead on matters of policy. That makes perfect sense to me. I've said that I'm absolutely open to reform. However, in the debate today, in the motion before us now, I'm unable to see these proposals as a coherent set of reforms that have been open to the sort of consultation, reflection, development I believe is warranted by constitutional change. I'll continue to follow the debate with an open mind as well as an attitude of scrutiny, but I'm not inclined to agree to support these changes. Go to my Rector.
Call on the Honourable Member, Mr. Clewett.
I rise today to speak on the motion put forward by the Honourable Member for Onchan, Mrs. Edge. At the outset, I will state clearly that I neither have a vested interest nor am I opposed to sensible and prudent reform of the Legislative Council or indeed of any part of our body politic. But the first question that must be answered is, what is the fundamental purpose of seeking this change? And secondly, why at this particular juncture? Is it a drive toward a more democratic institution? If so, none of the 6 points put forward would appear to particularly improve anything in that regard. The notion often claimed in some quarters that the Legislative Council has no public mandate and is therefore undemocratic needs to be put into some sort of perspective. For decades, the Westminster system has been upheld as a beacon of democracy across the world. And yet the upper house of that place is populated either by inheritance or patronage in ever-increasing numbers. MHKs do have a public mandate, that is clear. And that mandate enables them to delegate powers that extend to electing a chief minister, who is in turn empowered to personally choose a council of ministers. Senior government officials, members of boards and the like are routinely elected or appointed or otherwise approved by some combination of Keys members either directly or through their delegated powers. Why do Keys not then have the mandate to elect members of the Legislative Council? Item A of the motion is that MLC should not serve on government departments. The primary implication of this would be that MHKs would have to pick up 25% reduction in the available pool of members available to join departments, thereby increasing their workload appreciably. The motion is unclear as it stands as to what the role or relationship of any MLCs would have in departments. Would MLCs still work with ministers and department policy officers in fleshing out policy legislation before this comes to Legislative Council? Surely any lack of direct interaction would increase the toing and froing of legislation between departments and Legislative Council, slowing things down considerably. Any reduction of the duties of MLCs will surely also lead to additional public comment and speculation of the role and remuneration of MLCs in our Parliament. Item B, that candidates should not be proposed unless they have a support of at least 20 members of the public. There are several problems with this approach. Firstly, a member of the Legislative Council should be seen as representing all of the residents of the island. Any requirement for public support for a candidate would surely require a certain number of supporters across at least several constituencies for it to have any value whatsoever. The current proposal does not qualify the members of the public either. Surely any member of the public proposing a candidate should be a registered voter, not themselves otherwise disqualified, and should not be a direct relative or business associate of one. Item C states that a candidate should declare their interests before the election takes place. I support this measure. In fact, all candidates for any political office should declare their interests prior to an election taking place. Item D states that no part of the process of filling vacancies on rotation should take place until after the terms of office of the outgoing MLCs have expired. The net effect would be up to a potentially 3-month period during which only half the council were present, thereby restricting the amount of work that can be done at any point in time. This item seems to serve no real practical purpose other than to hobble the work of Legislative Council. Item E states that no one should be able to serve more than 2 terms as an MLC. While it is known that I have long been an advocate of term limits for all political officers under all circumstances, much of my view is driven by seeing in a number of jurisdictions geriatric politicians with various stages of dementia clinging onto public office long past their ability to properly legislate or by their sell-by date. However, the item again lacks any coherent substance. Are the 2 consecutive terms a lifetime restriction? Sorry, are the 2 terms a lifetime restriction, or 2 terms sequentially? Why 2 terms, not 3? If this motion is an attempt to bring about more parity with MHK elections, should similar restrictions not be imposed on MHKs or local councillors, for example? What is the problem being addressed here? The last several MLC elections have seen quite a few new faces. Most recently, 3 of 4 are new members with a wide variety of backgrounds. A social worker extraordinaire, a banker, and an entrepreneur and investor. Item F states that the serving MLC should be required to step down before seeking election to the House and Keys. Should this not extend to any other elected position, including whether MHKs that perhaps would stand down to run for Legislative Council? I don't have any particular feelings one way or another on this particular issue. Constitutional reform is an exceedingly time-consuming and difficult process, and is something that does need to be reviewed on occasion. But for all its perceived flaws in our system, somehow, by and large, it seems to just work. We have significant challenges ahead of us, many of which are decades in the making. Our focus needs to be on growing our economy, focusing on the day-to-day needs of our people, which includes housing, healthcare, education, and transport links, amongst others. In summary, Ectorant, while I'm in sympathy with some aspects of this motion, we have far more urgent things with which to occupy ourselves at this time. Yeah. The motion before us is flawed in several aspects, and I will therefore be voting against.
Yeah, well said.
Go to my Ectorant.
Call on the Honourable Member, Mrs. Paul Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I would like to congratulate Honourable Member for Council, Mr. Clewett, on his maiden speech. Mr. President, I recall Mr. Shimmons, when he was in this honourable court, once referenced a smorgasbord in debate. He said how much he loved a smorgasbord, as it offered a whole range of options and potentially tasty treats. The question is, though, of course, honourable members, how do we choose a well-balanced outcome and avoid giving ourselves indigestion when we are posed with a range of options? As others have said, I too am always open to the idea that we review and, where sensible, make reform. I think the debate, however, so far this evening has highlighted that there are a range of issues and questions that would need to be considered much further with the motion as drafted for us to be able to, well, for me to be able to support it, so that I was confident that we do not move into the, so I was confident that change delivered improvement without giving rise to the law of unintended consequences. Others have talked through the various aspects of the motion, and I agree with much of what has been said, so I will not repeat all of that. What I would say is, like the Honourable Member for Douglas North, Mr. Ashford, I too have changed my mind about Part A of the motion. When I was first elected to the Legislative Council, I had a thought process that actually the best way in which Legislative Council members might contribute was through primarily their scrutiny of legislation as a revising body, but also through their scrutiny roles on parliamentary committees. Actually, I took on a number of government roles when I was a member of the Legislative Council, never in a department actually, but a range of government roles, through which I learnt a huge amount and found myself able to contribute in those different roles. And actually now, speaking as with my experience of being a minister, I would echo the comments that have been made by several members about the value of members of Legislative Council and departments. And scrutiny is absolutely part of our role all the time, no matter what hat we're wearing in our roles as parliamentarians. And I would suggest that there is huge value in that internal scrutiny process within departments whilst policy is being considered, whilst legislation is being developed. Far, far better that we receive the input, the analysis, the different perspectives and skills as early as we can in the process in order that the product, hopefully, that comes forward eventually is as good as it can be. And I would also reflect that we are a small island, but as a self-governing Crown dependency, we are doing the same, many of the same things as far larger places. Indeed, as a small island government, we are running functions that local authorities run as well as central government. And the mix of skills available in this Honourable Court from time to time is something we must be sensitive to, and I would suggest we are far better off allowing ourselves the flexibility to absolutely harness those skills in the best way possible, whether through roles in government departments, boards and offices, or on parliamentary scrutiny roles. We should allow ourselves flexibility to make best use of our varied skills and experience for the good of the island. My other comment, I think, which I would reflect on Part D, others have explained some of the practical issues around delaying the process for filling vacancies until after members have gone out of office. I suppose the other question I would raise is, and what if a member of the House of Keys were to stand for Legislative Council again? So we recognise that we haven't had that situation in the past few elections to Legislative Council, but I suppose the question would be, if a sitting member of the Keys were also to put themselves forward, what would their position be? So I think this goes back to the idea that far more thought and consideration needs to be given to any process of reform before we start to advance certain ways forward. I understand reference has been made to my colleague from Glenfaber Peel and myself as two individuals who were sitting members of the Legislative Council and stood for election at the last general election. I think I'm right in saying, I don't want to speak for my colleague, that at the time actually we determined at the dissolution of the Keys that we would not come and use the facilities in legislative buildings. However, like members of the Keys, where we had government roles, I in particular was sitting on the Public Services Commission at the time and the Public Sector Pensions Authority, those meetings and those responsibilities continue, I think, as for anybody, until the next person is appointed to take over. And so I do think we have to be mindful again of the practicalities of handover as administrations, as elections happen. So I think my view would be that overall, and what Mr Crane, Honourable Member for Council, said did chime with me as well, that we are probably at our best when we are focusing outwards and getting on with the work that I think matters most to people in the Isle of Man. There has been a full review and numerous debates in the last administration around the functioning of Tynwald. I'm not sure that this is the right time to do that when there are so many other pressing matters we need to get on with. If there are any supporters for reform, though, I would suggest that it has to go through a committee process with full evidence and consideration of all matters, and so I'm not able to support the motion before us. Thank you, Mr President.
Honourable members, we've reached the allotted hour. Lauder?
Actually, it might be me reading the room very badly, but I think that most things have been said at this point. But I found that there might be an opportunity just to complete this particular debate before we rise to the evening. So just this particular debate.
On that point, I can inform honourable members I have two more speakers on my list. So is there a seconder for Lauder?
Hasn't been moved.
So the proposal is to complete this item before us, which is item 5. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Aye. Aye. Division call.
See, that's nice feed.
9 for, 21 against. Therefore, the court will now stand adjourned till 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. And next up to speak is Mr Mercer.